Having received strength from the spirit of light, Milaneo lit the sun, and the spellcaster Fried summoned the spirit of darkness and created the night. And if the first gave life force, illuminating the world with warm light, then Fried gave peace, casting a shadow on the world in which one could hide from the light and heat. And this is how the world of the Ubera Empire was created by their hands. Today's imperial family of Milano and the Fried archdukes are the only ones capable of controlling spirits in this empire. Princess Ubera Dorothea Milaneo is interested in history. She reads books, but is rather skeptical about what is written in them. Dorothy is distracted from her constant study by the princess's older brother, Raymond Milaneo, who runs into the library. The boy apologizes to his sister for distracting her and offers to play together. Dorothea looks at her brother and remembers how once this true heir to the throne already died at her hands in a past life, when she was a cruel tyrant. Now, Dorothy is experiencing her second life, given to her as a chance to make things right, and she does not want a repeat of the past. This time, everything should be the other way around, and her goal should be a life in which she will be kind, because her main lesson was that good deeds are rewarded with happiness, and bad deeds are rewarded with misfortune. At that time, Dorothea was truly evil, killing the crown prince and seizing the imperial throne. She destroyed all the undesirables and bestowed wealth and power on those she liked. However, when the heroine received everything, only the end awaited her, because the one she loved hated her and chose death, and the people with whom she shared the power strangled her with it. Then Dorothea happily accepted death, but suddenly fate decided to give her a second chance, and the girl was born again. Deciding for herself that from now on she lives differently, the princess understands that now she needs to tolerate her brother, no matter what he does. Ray hugs his sister affectionately. He is proud of how smart and well-read she is. The boy's head contains only flowers and butterflies, but he received more than Dorothy only because he was born a prince. Raymond keeps asking Dorothy to play with him, and then the nurse comes to the girl's aid, advising the boy not to distract his sister from her studies. The nurse notices Dorothea studying Ubera's history and is impressed by her knowledge. The princess reveals what she knows about the spirit stone that disappeared during the time of Kors. The maid never ceases to be amazed at the depth of knowledge of the little princess and wants the emperor to know about them. Dorothea's heart sinks. She asks the nurse not to talk about her with the emperor. The emperor is Dorothy's own father, but this word is alien to her because she does not feel it. Of course, they are related by blood, but this does not matter to Dorothy, since she was unable to inherit the right of Milano. Dorothea's mother, Empress Alice, died immediately after the birth of the girl, and therefore Carnon was indifferent to the child who was born at the expense of the life of his beloved wife. Previously, the girl did everything to make her father notice her. She fell in front of his eyes, demonstrated her intelligence. She tried her best to surpass Ray, but until the very end, her father did not look in her direction. However, with Raymond, it was different. He didn't have to do anything to receive gifts from his father and have dinner together. He could ask the emperor an endless number of questions and smile. And the girl did not understand why he loved Ray more. Dorothy couldn't accept that her father never looked her way, even though she tried so much harder. Therefore, Dorothy could only calm down when she tormented Ray properly and took away his things. As punishment, the emperor locked the girl in a room for a month, and the further it went, the more their relationship looked like a devilish, vicious circle. Dorothy longed for love, but her love remained one-sided and did not reach him, as if she wanted to reach out to the moon with her hands. This is how the seeds of evil were saturated with anger and guilt and germinate, bringing with them even greater suffering. Her jealousy and greed, her ability to go over people's heads, all this gave birth to the tyrant Dorothea Milaneo. However, now, in this life, the girl realizes that it is useless to shift her own sins onto others, and in this life, she will definitely be kind. The nurse persuades the girl to leave the library and take a walk in the garden. She invites her to go to the Rodina Ellis Garden, which the emperor created for his wife, who missed her homeland. Before her rebirth, the girl often went there, but now she hasn't visited it for a long time, so she obediently goes to the gate. Suddenly, she hears the voice of the emperor, who is outraged that some people are heading into the garden. Carnon did not see his daughter for so long that he did not recognize the princess in the girl. The nurse hurries to introduce the girl to her father. The emperor is dissatisfied with Dorothy's manners, and she is upset that he cannot even greet her normally. The woman justifies the girl by saying that she is surprised to meet the emperor, because in fact she shines in etiquette classes. Dorothea, lifting the hem of her dress, curtsies, thus greeting the emperor as befits. Emperor Karnan wonders what makes the princess unique, but she modestly denies her exceptionality. Having learned from the nurse that Dorothea knows the entire imperial family tree, Karnan demands that she tell everything she knows. The girl refuses, and the father and daughter begin a verbal spat, and each of them believes that one is testing the other's knowledge. The emperor continues to insist that she tell him everything she knows. Dorothea is stubborn, declaring that she is only saving the time of the busy emperor, who until now has been so busy that he has never visited her. Suddenly, Karnan changes the subject, ordering the girl to ask her for what she desires, knowing that she cannot remain silent, although she does not need anything from him in this life. Dorothy asks her father to prepare the best wine and name it in her honor. The emperor reprimands the nurse for talking about alcohol for a girl of that age. Dorothea stands up for the maid, saying that she read about this in a book about Babalua. The author of the book told how the hero drank wine with his beloved, and Dorothea became curious out of curiosity to try good wine at least once. Karnan was surprised by the erudition of the young girl and promised to fulfill her request if she told her family tree. Otherwise, he would sentence the servant who lied to him to death. Despite the fact that Dorothea obviously inherited the tyrannical character from her father, this time she obeys, because she decided to become kind. And the fate of the nurse now depends on her action. After this incident, the nurse expected that the emperor would become interested in his daughter, but he has never visited her until now. The maid explains Karnan's behavior as being busy, but Dorothea is glad that she does not see him, because this spoils her mood. Suddenly, Ray appears, and, having asked the maid not to give her away, Dorothy runs as fast as she can to hide from her annoying brother. Standing behind a column, the girl listens as her brother boasts of his abilities to control the spirit of light. The spirit of light is a force that once lit the sun and is available only to the Milenio family, but now it has weakened and can only light small lights. Over time, those who cannot control spirits at all began to be born into the family, and the princess is one of them. Raymond is upset that he did not find his sister, because a friend came to him and he wanted to introduce him to Dorothy. The princess decides to quietly run out through the back gate of the garden and runs without noticing that someone is standing on the threshold. The girl crashes into a dark-haired boy with a red tie and falls to the ground in surprise. The boy is alarmed that the girl fell. He apologizes, and Dorothea, hearing his voice, does not believe her eyes. He stands in front of her, the man whom she loved more than anyone in the world before her rebirth, the man who was then destroyed by her greed, and who hated her more than life itself. Brushing away the memories, Dorothy looks back at the boy, who continues to apologize and tries to help her get up. Without noticing it, the princess, who never stopped thinking about him for a moment, pronounces the boy's name, Theon. The boy is surprised how she knows his name, because he himself sees her for the first time. However, this thought fades into the background when he notices that she is crying and tries to calm her down. Seeing his crying sister and the boy crouching next to him, the alarmed Raymond rushes as fast as he can to help. The prince grabs Theon by the collar and shakes him as hard as he can, because he believes that he offended his sister. Dorothea separates the boys, claiming that she was crying because something got in her eyes. Theon is surprised and impressed that the girl turned out to be a princess who would so bravely cover for him in front of her brother. Raymond apologizes to the boy for misinterpreting the situation. The boys make up, and Ray is introduced to her new friend Theon's sister, Frida. He bows to the princess and kisses her hand as a sign of respect, once again apologizing for the incident. Dorothy looks at Theon and thinks about a new beginning for their relationship, hoping that in this life he will turn his attention to her. However, she is distracted from pleasant thoughts by a familiar voice calling Theon. Turning around, Dorothea sees in front of her Julia Delavigne, Theon's first and last love in a past life. Due to an agreement between the families and Dorothea's stubbornness, Theon had no choice but to marry her. But he loved Julia until his death, and this was Dorothea's past life. She longed for her father's love, but could not get it, and longed for Theon's love, but he did not give it to her. Even after his marriage, Theon constantly corresponded with Julia behind Dorothea's back. The heroine prayed that Julia would disappear, die, and could not be with him. She was delighted when a faithful servant with a solid track record, brought Dorothea the news of the death of her husband's beloved. The girl consoled herself with the illusion that now her lover would come to her, but he broke away from her embrace, preferring death. And now they are standing here, along with her brother, chatting cheerfully about something. Dorothea notices that Theon and Julia must be together in this life, because they are standing holding hands. Frightened that all her thoughts are visible on her face, the princess turns around and runs away. The brother tries to stop Dorothy, but she runs away with tears in her eyes from the people whose deaths she caused in a past life. Having run to her room, the princess immediately goes to bed and asks the nurse to let her rest. The next morning, Dorothea sits in her room and, as usual, reads a book with interest. However, she cannot concentrate as Raymond nervously paces back and forth across the room. Unable to bear it, the princess slams the book and demands that her brother calm down and stop flickering around. Ray shares with his sister his worries about the fact that this evening he will officially receive the title of Crown Prince. The boy realizes the importance of the event and worries because he believes that he is not worthy of this title. Raymond believes that his sister would be a much better candidate because she is much smarter and more talented than him. Dorothea denies this assumption because she does not know how to summon spirits. Raymond is sure that his sister will soon learn this, since she is very smart. The prince asks Dorothy to wish him luck, since this is very important to him, but does not receive support from her. The ceremony of handing over the crown is one of the main events of the empire, when the next successor to the emperor is named. Dorothea sits before the ceremony begins and looks at the decoration of the palace, which now seems very modest to her. And then the emperor appears, and the princess realizes that she has stopped experiencing any emotions. She looks at the scepter, from which the spiritual stone has disappeared, and remembers what she heard before the execution, that a fragment of it was found somewhere. Now all this has nothing to do with Dorothea, and her attention switches to the prince who has entered the hall. Raymond slowly approaches his father. There is concern on his face, and Dorothy is afraid that he will forget his speech. The girl is dissatisfied with her brother's performance and the way he controls the spirits. If she were in his place, she would not have made such a mistake. The ceremony comes to an end, and the emperor leads the crown prince to the guests gathered to celebrate, with Dorothea following silently behind them. The ladies who noticed the girl, admiring the beauty of the princess, noted her resemblance to her late mother. The emperor, who heard this, became furious and ordered the guests not to talk nonsense. Dorothea is saddened by what she heard, but she cannot leave this place for reasons of decency. Emperor Karnan and Ray are at the center of everything, and Dorothy is treated no better than a candlestick mounted in the wall. Before her rebirth, she would have come to the center and shown her importance, emphasizing what a fool Ray is compared to her. However, now there is not a single such thought in her head. She just wants all this to end as soon as possible. But someone is heading towards her. Raising her head, Dorothea sees Theon standing in front of her with a glass of pomegranate juice in his hands. The princess is glad to see him, and that he is without Julia. Theon invites her to drink juice and hands her a glass. They walk around the hall, and Theon tells how Raymond boasted to him about his sister and her knowledge. The boy suggests that now they can meet in Epistemic. Epistemia is the best academy in the empire, where only the most outstanding talents are trained. In addition, this is the main place where descendants of noble families, studying together, acquire connections for the future. However, unlike Ray, who was easily able to get into this academy, Dorothy, so as not to overshadow the prince with her knowledge, could not get there. Once, in a past life, she tried to resist this by throwing a stone towards the epistemic, but it broke the window and hit the eldest son of the Duke of Bronte on the head. After this incident, the emperor locked Dorothy in the castle, and thus an end was put in their relationship. That is why now, in order not to repeat the past, the princess herself decided not to enter the academy. Having learned about Dorothea's decision, and looking at the prince, Theon understands everything and tactfully decides not to continue the conversation. In order not to look humiliated in the boy's eyes, the princess decides to change the topic of conversation. However, the conversation started about the weather is interrupted by Julia suddenly approaching. Theon is looking for the Archduke, and the boy apologizes to the princess that he needs to leave. Dorothea is sad that Theon had to leave so quickly, and she considers leaving the event to her room herself. The girl approaches her father, who is standing with his back to her, to ask permission to leave. Duke Bronte, who is talking with the emperor at this moment, turns sharply towards the voice. Making an awkward movement with his elbow, he touches Dorothea's glass, and the juice spills onto her dress. The girl is upset, because Theon gave her this glass. Now there is no juice, and she is standing all dirty in the middle of the crowd. The Duke hurries to apologize to the princess, but the Emperor insists that Dorothy apologize to him herself. Ray, who noticed the incident, decides to intervene and declares his sister's innocence. However, Dorothea, who has decided to be pliable from now on, bows to the Duke and apologizes for her awkwardness. Bronte is embarrassed that the girl apologizes to him because it was his fault. The Emperor orders the servant to take the princess away to change clothes, and Dorothy is only too happy about this, because this is an excellent excuse to leave the event. As she leaves, the princess notices the eyes riveted on her and turns around to see the surprised eyes of Theon and Julia. Embarrassed that they have witnessed the princess losing her authority, Dorothy runs away from the reception hall. The girl sits on her bed, her knees tucked up, and thinks that she can tolerate such an attitude from her father. But Theon's gaze was unbearable for her. From thoughts about Theon and the fact that he will never love her, Dorothea is distracted by a knock on the door. Prince Raymond came to visit her because he was concerned about his sister's condition. Dorothy is angry with her brother and demands to leave her alone. She insists that he return to the event. Ray refuses to leave, since the reception in his honor does not excite him at all. He wants to be close to his sister. Hearing that the prince invites her to go out and play with him, Dorothy cannot stand it and jumps out of bed. She scolds Ray for being irresponsible, because since he is the crown prince, he should behave appropriately and stop thinking only about games. She grabs her brother by the robe and pushes him away from her with all her might, asking him to leave her alone. Suddenly, Dorothy realizes that Theon and Julia again witnessed this unsightly scene. As it turns out, Raymond brought them to play together, but Dorothy can now think of nothing but her shame. She slams the door in her brother's face so that he doesn't have time to say anything else. Closing the door behind her, the princess falls exhausted to her knees and cries. She hates herself and thinks that she looks pathetic and doesn't deserve love, but she understands that this is her path to redemption. For several days now, Dorothea has been lying in bed, exhausted and with a fever. She is being looked after by a nurse. Raymond has not visited her all these days, apparently offended. Dorothy sits in her room reading a book, worrying about being so rude to her brother. On the one hand, she is glad that he does not come, because he is so annoying, and on the other hand, she promised herself that she would be kinder in the future. Suddenly, the door opens, and Ray appears on the threshold, holding in his hands the package he brought as a gift to Dorothea. The boy tells his sister about his secret garden bed that he secretly made behind the yard, and now he gives her his first grown tomatoes. The prince brags about his achievements and promises that he will also bring the following vegetables to Dorothy to try first. The princess is annoyed that the prince, who was accepted into the episteme, wastes his time on the beds. The boy convinces her that he is engaged not only in the garden, but also in his studies, and asks his sister for forgiveness for angering her. Worrying and wringing his hands, Ray shares with Dorothy his worries about the fact that she never plays with him, reminding herself that she will be kinder from now on. Dorothy calmly explains to her brother why acting this way will not make him a good emperor. He promises that he will try his best in epistemic and be a good brother to her, and invites her to go outside as he is bothered by her always sitting in the castle. Raymond enthusiastically describes to his sister how wonderful it will be to go out into the city, but she refuses. After this, the prince constantly follows Dorothy wherever she goes and invites her to go for a walk. He does not give her passage, leaving notes asking her to take a walk on the pages of her books. Unable to withstand such pressure, Dorothy agrees to go out, only on the condition that she goes alone, accompanied by her nurse. Encouraged by the princess's decision, the nurse dressed her in a weekend dress, in which the girl did not feel entirely comfortable. However, the nurse had been waiting for this day for so long that she could not be stopped or convinced, and so he and the princess walked together along the busy market square. The nurse invites Dorothy to take her hand. Since there are too many people around, the girl feels awkward because in her past life, no one ever held her hand, and so they find themselves on the observation deck, from where the entire city is visible. Dorothea looked at the beautiful views and cheerful people walking around the city, but in her eyes, there was a different picture. In her memory, it was a war-torn city, and the streets were full of people who looked more like corpses, and even the wind was saturated with the smell of blood. And now she looks at the musicians in the square and thinks that this is what an empire looks like without a tyrant. The nurse invites her to go see the performance, and passing by the gateway, they do not notice that some person is watching them from there. Dorothea lies on the floor, blindfolded, and hears two male voices. The kidnappers, angry that the girl's clothes cost more than their dinner, plan to demand ransom for her, although they have no idea who she is yet. During the walk, the nurse took the princess to all the shops and bought her a new hat. Noticing that the girl did not like dressing up, she decided to take her to a bookstore. After the book, the maid suggested that she go eat delicious desserts and go through the alley to shorten the path. Suddenly, a man who had been watching them, sneaking up from behind, swung his club over the nurse. Dorothy saw the woman stagger from the blow, fall face down on the ground, and rush to help. The attacker covered the girl's mouth with a handkerchief soaked in some kind of odorous liquid. And now Dorothea lies tied up and thinks about how much she would not like to die at the hands of such scoundrels. As it turned out from the conversation between the kidnappers, they sent the nurse for money 3 days ago, but there is still no news from her. Surprised that she had been lying there for 3 days, Dorothy thought that the emperor must abandon her and not save her. The princess decides to take the situation into her own hands and show signs of life so that the kidnappers will pay attention to her. One of them approaches the girl and, taking off the blindfold, greets her good-naturedly. Dorothy decided to pretend to be a stupid and sweet little girl, thus learning that the man's name was Tito. The girl bombards the kidnapper with stupid questions, such as whether he will be her nurse and who he is in general. Tito answers her questions charmingly and patiently, introducing himself as her dad's friend. Dorothy asks to be allowed to call the man Uncle Tito while wondering how she will finish him off. Listening to compliments on her appearance, she remembers her past life. Then she knew one person who constantly told her this and asked her to smile. Looking around, Dorothy asks the kidnapper where they are and learns that it is Tito's house. Then, noticing a scar above the man's eyebrow, he distracts the kidnapper by complimenting him and asking where the scar comes from. Sitting down next to the girl, Tito begins to tell incredible stories about how he fought 17 enemies alone. Having taken a good look around, Dorothy asks Tito for something to eat. Since she hasn't eaten for 3 days, the man consults with his friend, but he is against feeding the girl. Tito sits Dorothy down at the table, and only now does she fully realize how weak and hungry she is. The second kidnapper gets up from his seat and puts a knife to the princess's throat and grabs her hand. And here again, Dorothea stands against the wall, her hands tied, and the criminal returns to his place. Suddenly, he screams and jumps away from the table, noticing some movement underneath. Dorothy looks closely to see what scared him so much and notices a scorpion. The kidnappers stand aside, trembling in fear, and the girl offers them to catch a scorpion in exchange for bread and milk. Tito, with trembling hands, unties the girl so that she can help them. Taking up the gambling sticks, Dorothy catches the scorpion, not understanding how the two men could be afraid of it. The kidnappers ask the girl to take the scorpion out of the house, and as Dorothy climbs the stairs, she realizes that the house is underground. All the way, she cannot understand why they let her go alone so easily. But when she leaves the house, everything becomes clear to her. Wherever she looks, it is absolutely impossible to understand where she can run, because there is an endless desert around her. Dorothy sits and chews the promised bread and milk. She is waylaid by the kidnapper, whose name turns out to be Danny, and suddenly Tito bursts into the room. The girl hears criminals behind her, discussing the news that a princess has disappeared in the capital. Dorothea is annoyed that someone from the castle let slip about her disappearance, and now the kidnappers will not leave her alive, otherwise they will not survive themselves. Realizing that she will not receive help from the emperor, Dorothy decides to take the situation into her own hands. And, when the kidnappers leave the door, she sneaks up to the closet. Finding Danny's bag, she pulls out a knife, deciding that this should be enough to defend herself. Hiding behind the door, Dorothy listens as Danny sends Tito to find the camels, and takes upon herself the murder of the girl. Realizing that her fate is sealed, the princess realizes that she has no choice but to use this knife. Entering the room, Danny discovers that the girl is not at the table and tries to find her. Dorothy runs at the kidnapper from behind, holding a sharp knife tightly in her hands. Jumping as high as possible, she swings and brings the tip of the knife down into Danny's shoulder. Having struck, Dorothea realizes that she is very weak and the wound was not deep enough. The man turns around and violently grabs the girl by the throat, Lifting her off the floor, Danny pins Dorothy against the wall with just one hand, and she completely loses her balance and ability to defend herself. Holding her down with one hand, he knocks the knife out of her hand with the other, and it falls to the floor. Dorothy has no strength. The kidnapper screams at her, and gradually anger overwhelms the princess. She gathers strength and pushes the man in the chest with her feet, pushing him away from her. Danny falls, and Dorothy, without wasting time, grabs the fallen knife and wounds him in the leg. He asks to have mercy on her, and she remembers this look, the look of a man who looks at a monster. Remembering her promise to herself to be kind, Dorothea whispers to her captor to just leave her alone. She turns around and goes out along the already familiar route. Dorothy leaves the house and looks at the desert into which she will go, with the only desire that everyone will leave her. The princess walks forward straight where her eyes are looking, and the sun is already beginning to set. It has gotten dark, and Dorothy is scared of powerlessness, because there is not a light in the desert, and she cannot even control the spirit of light. Tired, the girl lies down right on the sand and seems funny to herself, because even at such a moment she thinks that if Ray were in her place, he would have already been saved. Opening her eyes, Dorothy realizes that she has been lying there unconscious for some time. She looks at the stars and suddenly notices a light moving in her direction in the distance. Hearing the clatter of hooves, she gathers her strength and rises from the ground, regretting that she did not die. However, the desire to live overcomes the desire to die, and, rising to her feet, Dorothy desperately waves and calls for help. The girl's strength doesn't last long, and she falls face down into the sand. Through her closing eyelids, she sees approaching people in knightly uniforms and hears the hubbub of voices addressing her. Opening her eyes, Dorothea sees the vague outlines of a familiar chandelier overhead and realizes that she is in her room. Suddenly, she hears the Emperor's voice and sits up on the bed, listening. Behind the slightly open door, she sees her father and nurse, who tells the Emperor about how she and the princess were attacked. Dorothea is touched that the Emperor came here for her sake, and because she was almost killed. However, the next moment, all feelings collapse as she hears her father complaining that they are a lot of trouble. The Emperor orders the nurse to find the one who gave out the information and officially refute the rumors about the abduction of the princess. Dorothy sits on the bed and thinks that even despite her good behavior, her father still does not love her. The princess believes that everything that happens to her is a punishment for being a tyrant in a past life. A few days later, the imperial physician informs Dorothy of her weak condition, despite the drop in temperature. Next to the doctor stands a maid whom the girl sees for the first time. Dorothy is upset when she realizes that her wet nurse was fired because she knows that what happened was not her fault. The nurse always took care of the princess, and now she had no choice but to hope that the woman would be all right. In order to quickly recover from the shock, the doctor advises the princess to go on vacation to a quieter and more peaceful place. The girl is invited to go to the domain of Sarishan, and suddenly, she realizes what a great opportunity this is. After all, now she will be able to leave the palace and move away from Karnan, Ray and Theon and Julia, who will soon go to Episteme. Having decided for herself that there she can gain strength, Dorothea declares her intention to go on vacation. There is a knock on the door, and Raymond appears on the threshold with a bouquet of garden roses for his sister, as he did every day after the abduction. The prince learns that Dorothy is going to go to Cerithian by the sea. He is sad and does not want her to leave. Raymond feels guilty about Dorothy's kidnapping, but she tries to convince him otherwise. To dissuade the princess from leaving, Ray offers to help her enroll in Epistemia. The prince does not know that Karnan ordered Dorothy to refuse to enter the academy, and continues to persuade her. Realizing that he is doing this out of good intentions, the princess insists that she needs treatment. Raymond, whom tired Dorothy asked to leave the room, looked sadly at his sister and left. Only a few days have passed, and the princess is already ready for the journey, grateful to Karnan for his indifference, because of which she leaves the castle so soon. Suddenly, the girl is distracted from her thoughts by someone's voice that addresses her. Turning around, Dorothea sees a smiling Theon in front of her, who reports that he learned about her trip. The princess reluctantly answers him, because now she did not want to see him at all. Theon reaches into his pocket to take out the gift he had prepared for the princess. The boy hands Dorothy the sweets he brought, in case the princess gets seasick on the way. Theon is upset that he will not be able to see the princess often, but hopes that she will soon recover and return to the capital. In her previous life, Dorothy did not feel anything like this. It seems to her that Theon likes her, but she drives these thoughts away from herself. The princess turns around and hurries to leave as quickly as possible. She is embarrassed by these thoughts. Looking after her, Theon clenches his hands into fists with the hope that he and the princess will definitely meet again. Sitting in the carriage, Dorothy convinced herself to be cool and not give in to her feelings. However, she cannot get the thought out of her head that he took care of her and brought her sweets for the trip. And so Dorothea stands on the balcony and listens to the sound of the sea, breathing deeply as soon as she left the imperial palace. Here, in this place, there is no trace of her being a tyrant. And perhaps this is where she can start all over again. In the Saritian domain, the princess is looked after by the castle's maid, Carla. She also introduces Dorothea to the knight Stefan Greenwall, who is also appointed to serve under the princess. The girl looks at him and recognizes him as a knight from her past life, who reached the rank of vice captain in the best order of knighthood, and she took his life. Dorothy looks at him and realizes that if he is now 18 years old, then he has just joined the order, and instead of being promoted, he is assigned to her as a guard. This makes Stefan seem unhappy to Dorothy, and she extends her hand to him as a sign of her respect. In response to this, as a sign of friendship, the knight slaps the princess on the palm. Sitting in her room, Dorothy decides to write down a list of criteria for a prosperous life. Scratching the paper with a pen, she catches herself thinking that she herself does not understand what it means to her to live a prosperous life. She decides to ask Clara, who brought her tea and cookies, for advice. The maid believes that first you need to obey your parents, but this criterion does not suit Dorothy. Looking into the princess's notebook, Clara sees that the girl is about to write a wish list for a prosperous life and begins to laugh. Angry with the maid, the princess orders her not to be laughed at. Clara convinces the princess that she is not laughing out of malice, but because she thinks what Dorothy is doing is cute. To begin with, Clara invites the girl to start smiling more often, and Dorothy understands that until now, she has not yet had a reason for this. But the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about a kind person is a smile on his face, and so Dorothy tries to smile. However, after a couple of seconds, out of habit from pushing, a cramp passed through the princess's lips. Dorothea pushed the servants out of the room, saying that she needed to think. Taking a pen in her hand, she begins the list, and the first item for her is to learn to smile in a friendly manner every day. The second point Dorothy writes down is not to look at other people's things and remember that the throne belongs to Ray, and Theon belongs to Julia. By the third point, the princess undertakes to save 1 million people and vows to hear words of gratitude 3 times a week and donate money to charity every month. After Dorothy finishes writing, she looks over the list to make sure that this is enough for a successful life so far. Tired of sitting at the table, the princess, stretching, goes out onto the balcony to listen to the sound of the sea. She informs the servants standing outside the door of her intention to go out for a walk to the water. Despite the fact that Dorothy wanted to walk alone, Stefan still follows her, but he walks silently and does not disturb her. Suddenly, in the distance, the girl sees a man sitting on the beach with his knees propped up. She is surprised that someone else lives in the vicinity. Coming closer, she sees a blonde boy, whom she recognizes as Eden Bronte. In a past life, he was the main confidant of the tyrant Dorothea Milaneo and the most beautiful man she knew. In noble circles, he was called the Golden-Eyed Angel, and everyone, whether men or women, wanted to say at least a few words with him. He was so magnificent. The devoted servant, ready to act only for Dorothea's sake, gave her everything she loved. It was he who helped her get rid of Ray, and then killed Julia for her sake, and did this to everyone whom the Empress hated. He alone understood her feelings, and she thought that she had found only a faithful servant, although he so wanted to be in Theon's place. However, it is unlikely that he did all this just for her sake, because when Dorothea walked to the place of her execution, many people recognized Eden as innocent. He, like a snake, with the help of his tongue, was able to obtain amnesty by declaring that he was under the rule of a tyrant. Approaching closer, the princess thinks that in this life, it is better for her to stay away from Eden. However, having looked more closely, she notices that the boy is crying bitterly. Dorothy is surprised, because this boy is completely different from the one she knew in a past life. Suddenly, it dawns on her that perhaps Eden also has a chance to live his life differently and not step on the path of evil. The princess comes closer to the boy, He notices her, looks at her in alarm and fear. Confused by the stranger's presence, Aiden jumps up and runs away, ignoring Dorothy's pleas to stop. Here it is necessary to tell a little about Eden, who was the illegitimate son of the Duke of Bronte. The Duke accepted him into the family, but until he came of age, the boy could not enter the academy and did not have the right to appear in high society. After meeting Eden, who finds himself in the same situation as her, Dorothy feels tired and decides to return home. As soon as rumors spread in Cerishion that the capital princess had arrived, all the famous families, in order to establish relationships with her, began to send letters to her with offers of a visit. Dorothea pays short visits. All the ladies around are fascinated by her beauty and comeliness. The princess quickly gets tired of everyone's attention and asks Stefan and Clara to take her away. Duchess Bronte, sitting nearby, invites Dorothea to visit them. Deciding that this is a great chance to meet Eden and put him on the righteous path, the princess happily agrees. And the very next day, the princess visits the Duke's castle, where she is met by the Bronte spouses. The princess is invited to a richly decorated table, but looking around, she does not see Eden anywhere. Dorothy asks the owners of the castle about their son, but they say that he is an epistemic. Thinking that the princess meant George, she folds her hands under her chin and with a serious expression on her face, declares her desire to see Eden. Having learned that the princess saw the boy on the beach, the couple whispered about something for a long time. They tell her that Eden is sick, but she stands her ground and insists on meeting him. Dorothea is led into the winter garden, where a boy sits among pots of flowers at a round coffee table. Hearing approaching steps, he turns around and carefully looks at the guest with his golden eyes. They look at each other in silence for a few seconds, and then Aiden smiles modestly at Dorothy. The boy stands up, greets the princess, and introduces himself to her, expressing his joy at her visit. The princess dismisses the escorts because she wants to be alone with Eden. The boy asks what brings Dorothy to these parts, pretending that he did not meet her a few days ago on the beach. Aiden looks worriedly at the girl's thin arms. She claims that she is getting better, and she likes living in this city. Dorothy studies the boy's every word and movement, but cannot understand whether he is sincerely kind to her or hiding his feelings. Remembering his habit of raising his eyebrows when lying, the princess watches his eyebrows closely. She compliments him, and he lowers his eyes in embarrassment, covering his face with his hand. Dorothy realizes that the Aiden she knew before would not be embarrassed, but would behave defiantly. Suddenly, without expecting it, the boy says that he has never met anyone more beautiful than the princess. Now Dorothea realizes that she is confused, because what he says now may be flattery. Dorothea remembers how she used to always fall for his sweet speeches, and now, having decided that she will become his friend, she invites Eden to her castle. Delighted at the invitation, the boy joyfully jumps up from his chair and, instantly finding himself next to the princess, kisses her on the cheek. Dorothea was pleased to note that she would be able to add Eden's gratitude today to her list. However, in the evening, sitting at her notebook and remembering Eden's smiling face, she again doubts his sincerity. Meanwhile, at the castle, Clara informs Stefan that the princess's birthday is soon approaching. The girl is inspired. She wants to organize a wonderful holiday for Dorothea. Since Dorothea does not like dresses or jewelry, the maid shares her idea for a gift for the girl with the knight. Clara is excited about the upcoming holiday and asks Stefan to help her with the organization. And then the long-awaited day for Clara comes. She enters the princess's room, exploding a festive firecracker. The maid tried very hard to set a rich table with a variety of treats. Dorothy is grateful to Clara, who invites the girl to take a walk, because the weather is such wonderful outside. The princess agrees, and they go to the coast to breathe in the sea air. Suddenly, on the shore, they notice a shell, which Clara urgently asks the birthday girl to pick up. Dorothy decides that perhaps the maid hid a gift under the shell because her words sound quite forced. However, after going through a whole mountain of shells, the princess still finds nothing underneath. Turning around, Dorothy notices that Clara is not nearby, and, seeing a silhouette in the distance, she thinks that the maid has gone somewhere. However, taking a closer look, the girl realizes that a lion is walking towards her at a fast pace. The princess realizes that Stefan is standing in front of her in a lion costume, but does not show it so as not to spoil the surprise. Dorothea remembers how she recently read a difficult book, wrapped in a cover from fairy tales about the lion hero Leo, and apparently, Clara decided that this was the princess's favorite hero. Remembering her promise to be kind, Dorothy decides to play along with the servants and gives the lion shells picked up on the shore. Making a fake face, she asks the lion if his arrival is connected with her birthday. The princess experiences a previously unfamiliar feeling of care and thanks the lion from the bottom of her heart. Another moment, and the princess finds herself in the arms of a fairy tale hero who tenderly hugs the girl to himself. Dorothy can't believe that she is now being held in the arms of a knight, whom she laughed at in the past because he chose a bloody death in the name of the prince. She sees similarities in their destinies, because Stefan also has to make his own way, since he was not part of noble circles. Thinking about all this, Dorothea realizes that Stefan has always been a good and brave man. It starts to rain, and a knight in a lion costume runs and carries the girl back to the castle so that she doesn't catch a cold. The princess says goodbye to the lion hero without revealing that she recognized Stefan in him. Having changed into dry clothes and drying her wet hair, Dorothea examines the letter received from the capital. Having learned that this letter is from Raymond, the girl throws it on the table into a stack of the same unread letters received earlier. Stefan returns to the castle. He and Clara are whispering about something, pleased that, as it seems to them, they managed to deceive the princess. Continuing to play along with them, Dorothea wonders where Stefan has been all this time. The knight already had a prepared answer that he was in training, but the princess is not going to give up and asks why he did not prepare a gift for her. She wants him to teach her fencing as a gift, so that if the kidnapping incident happens again, she will be able to repel the attackers. Dorothy had not done this before, worried that if she became stronger, she would want more. But now she realized that good people can be strong. Squeezing the princess's small hands in his large hands, Stefan agrees to teach her how to fight with swords. And now, a few months later, Dorothea is already confidently wielding a homemade wooden sword. The girl does not understand why Stefan does not allow her to fight with real swords, out of fear that she will get hurt, or out of envy that she is so good at it. On another day of grueling training, Dorothea is distracted by the sound of someone's approaching footsteps. Deciding that Stefan is sneaking around to attack from behind, the princess turns sharply and swings her sword. However, she stops in time, recognizing the newcomer as Eden, who is delighted with the girl's talent, because he himself does not know how to fight. Dorothea recalls that in his previous life, Eden had never picked up a sword, because he had many supporters who did it for him. The boy is glad that the princess has recovered, and, stretching out his hand to her, wipes the sweat from her forehead with a handkerchief. The maids peeking out from behind the bushes watch with emotion the conversation of two little angels. Taking Dorothy's hand, Aiden reminds Dorothy that she invited him to visit the castle. He asks her to show him the estate, still holding the princess's hand. Thinking that her hands are probably sticky with sweat, Dorothy goes to the bathroom to wash her face. After taking a bath and changing clothes, she brings Eden to her room. The boy is impressed by the neatness of the princess's chambers. After looking around and rustling in his pockets, Eden pulls out the gift he brought and hands it to Dorothea. The boy unwraps the package, and Dorothy sees in front of her a magnificent gold necklace studded with rubies and diamonds. The princess understands that this is a very expensive gift. But after all, Eden is from the family of dukes, and apparently can afford such a thing. Dorothy politely refuses such an expensive gift. She only wants sincerity from him. Eden is upset by the refusal of the princess, who explained that it is better to give something like this to dear and close people. The boy admits that he was obviously too excited that someone approached him first, and Dorothea is again convinced of how skillfully he plays on people's feelings. Turning around, Eden notices letters from the imperial palace on the table and asks the princess about them. Having never opened the letters, Dorothy assumed that they were nothing but whining about how hard it was for Ray to study in epistemic school. Having driven away the thought of Ray, the princess invites Eden to leave the room, but suddenly he freezes near the chest of drawers. Dorothea turns around and sees the boy standing right in front of Theon's handkerchief, which he left for her when they met at the coronation. She runs headlong to the chest of drawers, grabs the handkerchief, and hides it in the drawer, hoping that Eden did not have time to see the initials embroidered on it. But obviously, the boy managed to see the handkerchief, since he promises Dorothy that next time he will give her just such a gift. Approaching the door to leave the room, Eden once again silently glances at the chest of drawers. The next morning, sitting at breakfast, Dorothy feels some kind of tension that reigns in the castle. Clara advises her to return to the Imperial Palace, as a terrible contagious disease is spreading in the city. Many die from this disease because the medicines to treat it are too expensive for ordinary people. Dorothy thinks about it, because she doesn't want to leave this beautiful place where she feels so calm. The princess realizes that this is a great chance to expand her list, and decides to help people with doctors and medicines. With so much money, Dorothea can finally do something good for others. And now, a couple of weeks later, Clara joyfully informs the princess that thanks to her, the village, which was languishing from infection, has regained vitality. With tears of joy, the maid admires Dorothy's kindness, and Eden, who appears as if out of nowhere, stands nearby. The princess does not know whether spending money, of which she has a lot, can be considered kindness, but in gratitude she receives gifts from the residents, which they leave near the palace. Eden convinces Dorothy that people return kindness for kindness, and will always remember her as a kind princess. Until now, she has never been able to feel that she has done anything good, but now she happily feels the gratitude of others. Dorothea invites Eden to stay for dinner, asks Clara to cook the donated potatoes, and plant the sprouted tubers in the garden. 3 years later, Dorothea is still intensely engaged in fencing with Stefan, and achieves great success in this. Of course, these successes are still not enough to overcome Stefan. Apparently, in a past life, she succeeded in this since she was older. Noticing that his shoulder is open to a blow, Dorothy rushes at the knight and raises her sword over him. However, Stefan blocks her blow and keeps the makeshift sword from striking. Dorothea is furious, because if it were a real sword, he would not be able to grab the blade with his bare hands. Meanwhile, in Epistemic, Raymond is sad, having written another letter to his sister, because in 3 years she has never answered him. Theon approaches, patting Ray on the shoulder in a friendly manner, reassures him, assuring him that Dorothy reads his letters. The boy invites his friend to go visit the princess, because the holidays will soon begin in Epistemia. Raymond is delighted with Theon's idea. He jumps for joy at the thought of meeting his sister soon. Dorothy keeps asking Stefan to let her fight with real swords. Clara, who had been waiting for them for dinner for a long time, examines with horror the knight's hands, covered with splinters. She takes the princess to take a bath and scolds her for being so engrossed in her fencing practice. The maid tells Dorothy that the locals still bring vegetables to the castle as a sign of gratitude. The princess looks out the window and notices a boy behind the bushes, who, leaving the bag, stealthily runs away from the garden. Dorothea thinks about catching him next time and inviting him to dinner. Letters arrive from the capital again. This time there are 2 of them at once, and the princess notices that one of them is not for her. She calls Stefan over because the letter from the knightly order is addressed to him. It informs about the promotion exam, thanks to which Stefan will have the opportunity to become a knight of the highest rank. This is good news, but it means that Stefan may soon leave Cerithian. Dorothy sees the exam as a great opportunity for the knight and asks him to show her the letter. It says that the exam date is set quite soon, so you need to go right this week. The letter also states that the Imperial Palace will no longer provide the princess with a personal knight for protection. Dorothea asks Clara not to worry, because they live in a quiet place. And besides, Stefan taught her fencing. Clara leaves, and Dorothy praises Stefan, noting that this is a great chance for him to get promoted, because by staying with her, he is standing still. The princess wants to organize a decent send-off for him, and asks him to stay until the day after tomorrow. The knight gets down on one knee in front of the girl, and she repeats her request to stay longer. Stefan takes the princess's hands in his, and after a short silence, tells her that he is her personal knight. He considers it his mission and duty to be there and protect her. Dorothy is touched, but she does not understand why she is surrounded by such fools who refuse benefits and act at a loss. However, Stefan doesn't think he can look like a fool just because he does a job he enjoys. Dorothea looks at him and remembers that he behaved the same way before her rebirth, protecting Ray even when it became obvious that he had lost. Thinking that Stefan has always been a person who makes stupid choices, the girl throws herself on his neck. She hugs her knight tightly, mentally thanking him for the choice that no one else would have made in his place. In the afternoon, Dorothea, accompanied by Stefan, goes to the city square, which today is full of people. Because of the crowd, the princess does not see what is happening, and the knight takes her in his arms. Finding herself above the human heads clustered against the wall, Dorothea sees an announcement about a tournament for amateur swordsmen. Registration for the competition began today, and the princess persuaded Stefan to sign her up for participation. The man at the registration desk makes Dorothy laugh, but the girl does not back down. He is angry at her bickering and accuses her of bad manners. Hearing insults addressed to her parents, Dorothy becomes furious and can barely restrain herself from losing her temper. However, Stefan immediately comes to her aid, thrusting his sharp sword into the man's table, right between his hands. He orders the boar to follow the rules, and he, trembling, hands Dorothea a registration sheet. Coming out of the tent, the princess joyfully thanks the knight for his help and offers to return to the castle. Meanwhile, two boys are walking across the square. One walks ahead, scolding the second, who is loaded with boxes and demanding to call himself a young master and not a brother. Suddenly, the boy drops the boxes and their contents break, angering the elder. Dorothy turns around at the noise and decides to do a good deed before returning and help the boy. While collecting the fragments, the boy injured himself and screamed, and the princess recognizes Eden in his voice. Even more angry at his half-brother, Jonathan swings his hand at Eden, ready to strike. However, he is stopped by Dorothea, who stands between them and shields the boy with herself. At the same moment, Stefan grabs Jonathan's hand, and all he can do is get angry and try to escape from the knight's strong hands. Satisfied with her good deed for the day, Dorothy extends her hand to Eden and helps him up from the ground. The enraged guy, not knowing that the princess is in front of him, is indignant that she dared to contradict the duke's son. Dorothea, who has decided that she will not be evil, silently turns, takes Eden by the wrist, and leads him away. The princess thanks Stefan for his help, and the boy is touched by the princess's concern. Eden, upset that she let go of his hand, decides to once again draw the princess's attention to himself and screams. Turning to him, Dorothea notices that his cheek is swollen, but he claims that this happens to him often. Eden asks the princess to stay with her until Jonathan stops being angry. Dorothy does not recognize this boy, who suffers insults, as the former Eden, and invites him to her castle. As soon as the princess enters the threshold of the castle, a joyful Ray, who missed his sister so much, flies out to meet her. Dorothy learns that it is the holidays, and the prince, taking advantage of this, decides to visit her. Ray throws himself on her neck, squeezing and hugging her, and then Dorothy notices that the prince has not arrived alone. Theon stands right in front of her, not hiding his joy at the long-awaited meeting with the princess. Dorothy pronounces his name in surprise. He is glad that she remembers him, and Eden, standing at a distance, closely watches what is happening. Having learned that Ray invited Theon to go to Cerithian together, Dorothea grabs his hand and drags him out of the room. Locked in her room, Dorothy listens to her brother's excuses for missing her and wanting to surprise her. She scolds the prince for creating a disaster by coming without permission and also bringing Theon with him, and kicks them out. Raymond begins to cry. He is upset that she did not answer his letters, and he was worried about her. Angry at Ray's tears and how they make her look like a villain again, Dorothy grabs the doorknob to leave. However, upon opening it, she finds herself face to face with Theon, who is concerned about the princess's behavior. Dorothea can't stand it and hastily runs away, not paying attention to Theon trying to stop her. However, he catches up with her and grabs her hand. Dorothea stops. Her heart is beating wildly in her chest. She had waited so long for him to take her hand, and now he was holding her, and she was unable to turn around, feeling unworthy. Theon asks her to give him a minute, apologizes for the unexpected visit, and admits that he really wanted to see her. Continuing to hold her hand, he kneels in front of the princess, expressing a desire to get along with her. Tears appear in Dorothea's eyes, because in a past life she so often asked Theon for this, but he did not meet her halfway. Suddenly, the silence between them is interrupted by Eden approaching, complaining of pain in his cheek. Dorothea apologizes to the guest for forgetting about him, takes the boy by the hand, and takes him away to get some medicine. As he leaves, Eden gives Theon a long look, and Theon stares into his eyes in return. Dorothy brings the boy into the room and, asking him to wait for her at the door, heads to the closet. Looking through boxes of medicine, she mentally blames herself for running away from Theon, so ugly, when he offered to get along with her. Dorothy hands Aiden the bottle, but he gives it to her because he thinks she needs it more since she looks sick. The princess is afraid that he noticed something in her attitude towards Theon, and Eden, bending over her, whispers that he likes her. Dorothea pushes him away. She doesn't like such jokes, and Idan notices that she must be sick since she doesn't smile even at these jokes. She kicks the boy out of the room, and in the corridor, he meets Theon again. Aidan Bronte introduces himself to him and tells him that the princess herself applied the medicine to his cheek. Theon Freed also introduces himself to Eden and is about to enter Dorothea's room, but he stops him. He explains this by saying that the princess was very tired after fencing lessons and the subsequent walk around the city with Eden. To prove his closeness to Dorothy to the surprised Theon, he reveals that he sees her once or twice a week. The boys look intently into each other's eyes again, and Eden, admitting that he said too much, bows and leaves. Dorothy sits in the room, upset that she looks stupid and unable to even smile at Theon, but she has been rehearsing a smile for so long. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. The princess wipes the tears from her face and opens the door. Stefan is standing on the threshold. Dorothy asks him to come in, and sitting him down on the sofa next to her, asks him to listen to her. She talks about her nightmare in which she loved a man, but he hated her so much that he eventually died in her room. Dorothy shares her fear that she is destined to be a villain, having even caused her mother's death. Suddenly, Stefan grabs the girl, hugs her tightly, and strokes her back tenderly. The knight claims that the princess is a kind girl, and she becomes much better and calmer. Nuzzling his shoulder, Dorothy thanks Stefan and mentally asks him for forgiveness for killing him in a past life. Clara, who is looking for the princess throughout the castle, hears sobs behind one of the doors. Deciding that it is Dorothy, the maid enters the room, but sees Ray there, crying, sitting on the floor with his knees drawn up. Raymond is upset that his sister called his arrival a disaster. It seems to him that she hates him. It hurts him that in Dorothy's eyes, he looks like a fool, but he was just worried and missed her. Clara is trying to prove to Ray that he cannot be a fool, if only because he studies at the best educational institution in the Empire. The boy admits that he took only 80 place out of 100, and he does not know how to win Dorothea's love. Clara remembers that the princess did not even open her brother's letter, and thinks about how she can reconcile them. She reveals that Dorothy loves fencing, and Ray decides to take part in the tournament to win her sister's attention. Theon enters the room and announces his intention to leave the castle because the princess is ill. Excited, Clara runs to check on Dorothy, leaving the boys to rest in the room. Theon believes that he should not have come, but Ray rushes to take the blame. At this moment, Theon's gaze falls on the bedside table. She notices her handkerchief, which he gave to the princess at the emperor's reception. He was sure that she had thrown him away, but now hope glimmers in his soul. Night has fallen, and Dorothy, suffering from insomnia, goes out onto the balcony to breathe and listen to the silence. She looks at the stars and fiddles with Theon's handkerchief in her hands, wondering if it would be better to give it to its owner. A sudden gust of wind snatches the handkerchief from her hands, and Dorothy does not have time to catch it. Leaning over the railing, the princess sees how Theon, who was walking through the garden at that moment, picks up the fallen scarf. The girl blushes with embarrassment and hurries to say that she was going to return the item to its owner. Finally, Dorothy smiles, and Theon, complimenting her smile, asks her to stay on the balcony. He tests the tree for strength and begins to climb it, getting closer to the princess's balcony. Now he is already sitting, dangling his legs on a tree, face to face with Dorothea, and thanks her for waiting for him. The girl can barely hold back her tears, because it was he who always ran away from her in a past life, and now she thanks her for not running away. The princess extends her hand to him and asks him to climb up to her, because sitting on a branch is not safe, and she is afraid for him. Theon cannot understand Dorothea, but he extends his hand to her and lowers himself from the tree onto the balcony. The boy thinks that the princess is uncomfortable with him, but she hastens to dissuade him from this. He admits that he missed her, but didn't write letters because he thought she didn't love them, and now he's very happy to be around. Dorothy's heart is pounding. It all seems like a dream to her, because he has eluded her so many times in the past. Theon admits that he likes to walk at night, and this is likely due to the fact that he belongs to the Freed family. Dorothea remembers how, in his previous life, he liked to stay up late and take a nap during the day. Theon wishes the princess good night and hands her his handkerchief, which he picked up from the ground under the balcony. Dorothy thanks Theon because she had never received gifts from him before. Returning to the bedroom, the girl clutches a handkerchief in her hand. Feelings overwhelm her. However, she pushes these thoughts away by reminding herself that Theon belongs to Julia. and she wrote it down as a rule in her notebook. The next morning, Dorothy wakes up to the morning silence being broken by the scream of Clara, who has learned that the princess has signed up for the tournament. Trying not to reveal the true cause of her anxiety, the maid worries about the disaster that will happen if Ray and Dorothy clash in the tournament. And now the time has come for the competition. The princess, accompanied by Clara, Stephane, Ray, and Theon, comes to the square. Brother and sister look at each other and understand that both came not to root for each other, but to fight. Dorothea decides not to give up what she wants just because of Ray. She prepares for the competition without worry. The princess learns from the list of participants that she will be fighting someone named Alex, and Clara is glad that her opponent is not Ray. Apparently, the participants were distributed evenly so that older guys would advance to the next round. Since the tournament is organized by the Bronte family, Edan is also in the square and hears the conversation between Dorothy and the maid. Having learned that the princess has a very strong opponent, he asks his father to change the distribution to guys with similar physical characteristics. Eden explains this as trying to make the tournament interesting for the spectators, and the Duke praises him for his initiative. Upon learning that the distribution has changed, Alex assumes that Dorothy was afraid of his strength. The princess is confident that she can defeat the braggart and challenges him to fight her on the tournament field. Dorothea asks the organizers not to change the distribution table and leave everything as it was originally. The competition begins, and Raymond is the first to be called to the battlefield. He is excited and looks for his sister in the crowd. Noticing her, he waves to her with the hope of support, but she does not pay attention to him. The signal sounded. The opponents came out opposite each other. Raymond took up his weapon. Dorothy notices how his gaze changes, which always changes at important moments, although he usually acts like a naive fool. Only a minute had passed since the start of the battle, and Raymond had already knocked down the enemy, disarming him. Dorothea, not paying attention to her brother's joyful exclamations, concentratedly heads to the field where the enemy is waiting for her. Eden is worried when he sees that the distribution has not been changed, because Alex is larger than the girl and could hurt her. The competition begins, and Dorothea, looking into the eyes of her surprised opponent, only regrets that the sword in her hands is not real. Taking advantage of his slowness, she disarms Alex, who is trembling either from anger or from surprise. Dorothea is announced as the winner of the second round, and the admiring crowd whispers, wondering who she is. Theon, who watched the fight with bated breath, cannot take his eyes off the princess. Raymond admires Dorothy's talents, and she asks him not to show in public that they know each other. The prince is upset. Theon approaches him, and the boys talk about a possible meeting between brother and sister in the finale. They both advance unopposed to the finals, and in the semifinals, the princess will have to compete with another newcomer, Joy. Dorothy looks at the boy who really wants to win, and he seems familiar to her. Having started the competition, the princess recognizes him as the same boy who left vegetables on the threshold of her castle. However, his abilities are not enough to defeat Dorothy, and he falls to the ground, upset that he will not be able to receive the prize. He is angry because he could live on this money for a whole month and was even ready to sell his life for it. Dorothy thinks this is stupid and advises Joey to find her if he ever has to sell his life for money, finally telling him that the potatoes he brought were very tasty. And finally, the final, in which Raymond and Dorothea Milaneo will compete with each other. Standing in front of his sister, Ray offers to give her first place without a fight, but Dorothy tells him not to dare give in. The princess does not like that everyone around is confident in her victory. She does not want to look like a weakling in the eyes of others. Clara doesn't know which child to root for, because she's worried about both of them. Dorothy gets hit in the arm and experiences severe pain, but immediately pulls herself together. Raymond is very worried that he hurt his sister and asks for her forgiveness. Dorothea becomes angry and demands that the prince concentrate and continue the competition. Ray is at a loss. He can't continue to compete with his sister like this. Noticing that he is giving in, Dorothy throws down her sword and leaves the tournament field. Excited, Ray hurries after her, followed by the event organizer. Not noticing the rope holding the tent under his feet, he stumbles over it. The structure begins to fall apart, and the beams are already sloping over Dorothy's head, who has stopped and is angry at Ray running after her. The next moment, everything happens too quickly. The princess sharply pushes away her brother, who ran up to her, and now she was lying on the ground, and her right hand was pressed to the sidewalk by a large wooden pole. Eden and Theon, who were watching what was happening, frightenedly rush to her aid. Dorothy, with her arm in a bandage, stands in front of Clara and Stefan, who scold her for being so careless. She thinks that when they are both in danger, it is more important to save the prince, but Clara and Stefan think that the princess is more important to them. Dorothea thanks her devoted servants for such words. She is touched by their concern. At this very time, Raymond cries sadly, admitting that his arrival actually turned out to be a disaster. As his sister said, Theon, coming up from behind, calls out to his friend, but he is sobbing so selflessly that he does not hear him. The boy decides to leave the prince alone and goes out into the hall of the Bronte estate, where they all went to bandage Dorothy's broken arm. Eden stands nearby by a column, resting his head in his hands and obviously thinking about something. Noticing Theon, he expresses to him his assumption that Dorothy is uncomfortable in his presence and hints that he needs to leave. Theon studies Eden's unpleasant look and expresses his dissatisfaction with his excessive interest in the princess. The boy does not deny this and admits that he really likes Dorothea. Bronte quips that Theon should be familiar with this feeling because he has a beloved Julia. Theon denies the rumors and claims that he and Julia are just good friends. Dorothea thanks the Duke of Bronte for his help in her treatment. Leaving the castle, she notices, not without pleasure, his brother George next to Eden, who bows to her, recognizing her as a princess. Eden wanted to say so much to Dorothea, but she left without even looking at him. The sun is slowly setting behind the horizon, and the imperial carriage is taking the prince and princess back to the castle. Raymond asks his sister for forgiveness for getting hurt while saving him, and asks her not to risk herself. Dorothy realizes that Ray never became a good emperor because he is too kind, and this needs to be fixed. Having learned from her brother that he is ready to do anything for her, the princess asks him from now on to do as she orders him. Before going to bed, Clara told Dorothy that Theon was leaving soon, so now the girl was lying in bed and could not sleep a wink. She understands that it is unknown when they will be able to meet again, and therefore jumps out of bed. Throwing a scarf over her shoulders, she goes out into the corridor, where she meets Theon, who has just packed his bags for departure. Trying to stop the trembling in her voice, she explains that she came to say goodbye to him. Smiling, he promises that by the time they next meet, he will be prepared enough to be able to protect her. Not recognizing him as the old Theon from her past, she happily promises him to answer all his letters. The guy is happy. The smile never leaves his face when he says goodbye to the princess. However, he suddenly stops Dorothy as she leaves to make sure that she and Eden are just friends. Realizing that Eden Bronte's feelings for the princess are not mutual, Theon leaves the castle with a calm heart. Lying in bed, Dorothy doubts whether everything she saw was a dream or in reality, and imperceptibly falls asleep. She dreams of a past in which Eden whispered in her ear that she had every right to become empress. It was he who inspired her, that she was more worthy than others to take the throne, and she would not have another chance if she did not act. On the day of her father's funeral, she came to the prince, whom the emperor ordered her to protect. Realizing that people would judge her in any case, she attacked her brother in order to kill her only loved one. He asked Dorothea to surrender, since he was obviously stronger than her, but she did not stop and plunged a sword into his heart. Then she decided that he was so stupid that even in such a situation, he showed indecision, and then began to cry, affectionately addressing her in the face of death. Dorothea thought that at that moment she was smiling, having gained the throne, but tears flowed from her eyes. The princess wakes up and replays the nightmare from her memories over and over again in her head. She thinks that in today's tournament, he simply gave in to her, without putting all his strength into the fight. Suddenly, she realizes that perhaps then, in the past, he succumbed to her in the same way, sacrificing himself. Dorothea is distracted from her thoughts by the creaking of the door opening slightly and someone entering the bedroom. The princess gets up in bed and sees Raymond on the threshold, who is worried that she cannot sleep because of the pain in her arm. The boy goes to Dorothy's bed, promising to stay with her until she falls asleep. O carefully covers her with a blanket and tells her that he misses his mother very often. Unlike him, Dorothea cannot miss her because she believes herself to be responsible for her death. Raymond is angry with his sister for her thoughts that if she had not existed, he would have lived happily with both parents. He is happy that he has such a sister, and he is sure that his mother would not regret that she gave birth to Dorothy because her death was not her fault. The princess listens to Ray and once again thinks about how stupid he is, but she is touched by his words. The prince invites Dorothy to go with him to Lampas, and having received a refusal, asks her to allow him to come to her again. Lying with her back to her brother, the princess promises him to think about his request. Hearing snoring behind her, she sits up and sees that Ray has fallen asleep, his head on the edge of her bed. She tries to wake him up, but instead of leaving, he sleepily plops down next to her on the pillow, and she covers him. Dorothea looks at her brother, who has disturbed her feelings and is now sleeping next to him without his hind legs. It's morning, and Clara goes into Dorothy's bedroom to wake her up. Entering the room, she looks tenderly at her brother and sister sleeping next to her. Raymond has been doing the princess's bidding all morning, and she thinks he has no dignity. Then a plan comes into her head, and she asks Ray to bring paper and ink and write in her place while her arm hurts. Dorothy sits him down to write and dictates to him the genealogy of the Milaneo family, demanding that he write down everything she says. The princess lists the names of all the emperors, one after another, thus deciding to teach Raymond history. The sweaty prince, who cannot shake the feeling that he is not helping Dorothy study, but is studying himself, diligently continues to write. Suddenly, he stops and excitedly asks if she has received his letters, since there has never been a response from her. In response to his suggestion that she was bored, Dorothy replies that she likes being alone. She doesn't really like being alone, but she always understood that if no one loved her, she had to get used to being alone. Ray sadly asks the princess why she doesn't love him, and promises to do everything to improve and earn her love. Dorothy thinks that it infuriates her that Ray is so kind, and that only he can see the spirit of light. It infuriates her that he gets more than her, but what infuriates her most is that in his past life, he died at her hands, and only she remembers all these painful memories. Remembering both fights with Ray, from the past and present, Dorothea asks her brother why he refused to win. He insists that he did not give up the victory and was not going to give in, but was only worried about it. Dorothy admits that what she doesn't like about him is that he is kind, and she is evil. Tired, the princess plops down on the bed and invites Ray to continue his studies tomorrow. Bending over her, the prince promises that during the next exams, he will definitely be among the 50 best students of epistemia. Raymond plans to prove to his sister that he is not a fool and swears to her on his fingers. Meanwhile, at the Bronte estate, Jonathan grabs Eden by the collar of his shirt and is angry that his brother did not tell him that the girl who stood up for him in the square was a princess. Smiling, Eden makes an excuse by saying that, while collecting the broken fragments, his head was spinning, and he forgot to introduce Dorothy. Jonathan's mother, who arrived in time to hear the shouts and insults directed at Eden, stands up for the boy. After hugging him, she decides to punish Jonathan by canceling the party, to which his friends have already been invited. With tears in his eyes, Eden asks his stepmother for permission to visit the princess who was injured in the Bronte family tournament. The woman praises Eden for his kind thoughts and advises him to prepare a gift for the princess. Clara is in the kitchen doing her best and preparing soup for the injured princess herself. After trying it a little, she feels like it's missing something, and she looks around among the people in the kitchen for someone who can help her. Seeing Stefan coming out of the kitchen, she stops him and asks him to try the soup. The knight praises the dish, and Clara, overjoyed, punches his hand so hard that the soup spills onto Stefan's shirt. The displaced maid promises to clean everything and begins to diligently rub the stain with a rag. Suddenly, Stefan breaks free, runs away from Clara, rushes in a circle and runs away, leaving the maid in the kitchen, surprised by her behavior. Dorothea stands on the balcony, looking at the sea and enjoying the beautiful weather, thinking that Eden promised to visit her. At this very moment, Eden himself comes up, apologizing to the princess for being late. He expresses concern that the injury will prevent her from fencing. Noticing that the cool evening is blowing from the sea, the boy takes off his jacket and throws it over Dorothea's shoulders. The princess smells the scent of flowers that always surrounds Eden Bronte. He hands the girl a gift, neatly wrapped in a bundle and tied with a golden bow. Reminding her that she did not accept his previous gift, Eden unwraps it and takes out a scarf with a sword embroidered on it. Dorothea thanks the boy, and remembering that in a past life she had such a scarf, asks where he got one from. It turned out that Eden asked to make it especially for the princess who likes swords. In response to his gratitude, the boy embarrassedly asks Dorothea to fulfill his request. The request is to allow her to sign her plaster, and the princess agrees. Entering the room and taking a pen from the table, Eden writes on the bandages what he has long wanted to tell Dorothea. He wrote that a beautiful pearl matures from old wounds and shines brighter when the night ends. Having learned that Eden was initially confident that she would allow him to sign, Dorothy realizes that she has again succumbed to his plans. Smiling, the boy asks the princess for permission to visit her again soon. A month passes. Dorothy sits in her room, reading a book and thinking about how the castle became calm again after Ray left. Clara runs into the room and gives the princess a letter received from the imperial palace. From it, Dorothy learns that she must fulfill her duties and meet someone from the royal family of Hark. The princess remembers how in a past life, upon ascending the throne, she killed Hark, but cannot remember why she did so. At this very moment, her thought is pierced by a memory. The reason for her action was none other than Eden Bronte. Nereus Hark had a fiancée, Monica, whose family decided to get engaged for political reasons. However, at the debutante ball, she, like many other girls, fell in love with Eden, and he just enjoyed it. Monica announced to Nereus that the engagement was broken, and that even if she was not destined to be with Eden, she did not want to marry without feelings. Angry, Nereus decided that Eden was the cause of all his troubles, and, seeing him anywhere, he humiliated and mocked him in every possible way. However, Eden did not remain in debt and replied that Nereus could not keep his beloved because of his helplessness. After this, Nereus, as soon as he ascended the throne, immediately attacked the empire, and Dorothea and Eden were able to stop this. Dorothy never liked Hark, but things must be different now, so she decides to create a positive image of the Bronte family. The princess wants the relationship between Eden and Nereus to be normal in this life, and not lead to conflict between empires. Deciding not to hesitate, Dorothea orders Clara to prepare a carriage to go to the Bronte estate. Sitting over a cup of tea with Eden, they discuss the imminent visit of the Hark delegation. The boy tells her that he plans to greet them with her, and Dorothy even choked in surprise, because she was sure that Eden would be hidden as an illegitimate child. The boy wants to ask his parents to take him to the reception, because the prince from Karka is the same age as him. Dorothea does not like this idea, because Nereus will not even consider an illegitimate who does not study in epistemic. The Duke of Bronte will regret bringing Eden into the world, and the boy will suffer mental wounds. Not knowing how to dissuade him from this idea, Dorothy decides to tell him that she saw an astrologer, and he said that Eden would have an increased aura of death if he met with representatives of Hark. Eden laughs embarrassedly, because it turns out that the princess is interested in him from the astrologer. Dorothea understands that she was a little stupid by hastening to name such a reason, but she did not have time to come up with anything smarter. Eden looks at the princess, and with a smile on his face, tries to find out what else the astrologer told her about him. He agrees to her request not to date Hark, but in return asks to accompany her when she makes her debut in high society. Before her rebirth, Dorothea did not have a partner. The place of an escort was considered almost a punishment in the palace. In the end, Ray recommended his friend Theon as an accompaniment, and he could not refuse. It was then that Dorothy fell in love with him, which later turned into misfortune for Theon. The princess was carried away into memories of the time when Karnan insisted on their engagement in order to build a bridge of relations with the freed family. Aiden repeats his question and asks Dorothy to promise that she will lend him a hand on the day of her debut. Deciding for herself that this is only for the better, the princess swears her promise on her fingers. And a few days later, Nereus Ponce from the kingdom of Kark stands in front of Dorothea. The princess tries to set herself up for good, despite the arrogant look of the guest, because she plans to improve the relationship. Nereus stands silent and motionless, and the servants rush to tell him that the princess is in front of him. However, the guest laughs at Dorothea for not knowing how to control spirits. In the royal family of Ponce, the power of the spirit of water is passed down from generation to generation, with which they still maintain a close connection. Nereus does not agree to call someone a princess who does not know how to handle spirits and could not even enter the epistemium. Dorothea tells him that she did not go there of her own free will, and not because she could not. With her diplomatic behavior, she proves that she is much more educated than Nereus, although she does not study in epistemia. They look into each other's eyes with flaring hatred, without interrupting the verbal skirmish. Sitting over a cup of tea, Dorothea, without losing her dignity, reveals to Nereus all her scientific knowledge. Not to be outdone, he remembers that military affairs is also studied in epistemia. Then Dorothy, in a calm tone, invites him to compete with swords and asks him to behave politely if she wins. Nereus was absolutely confident of his victory, but almost immediately after the start of the battle, Dorothea disarmed him. The princess mocks his abilities because it was the first time she picked up a sword after removing the cast, but even so, he could not defeat her. Angry, Nereus summons the spirit of water, and Dorothea is whirled around in a strong whirlpool in front of the frightened servants. Because of the water, it becomes difficult for the princess to breathe, and she is scared to realize that due to her inability to summon spirits, Ubera may soon be absorbed by Hark. Having gained strength from the anger overwhelming her, Dorothy raises her sword and cuts the water with a flourish. Nereus cannot believe his eyes, because the princess was able to resist the spirit without having any abilities. Dorothea assures Clara and Stefan, who have run up, that she is fine and gets back on her feet. Approaching Nereus with a confident step, she demands to raise the sword again to continue the fight. He justifies himself by saying that the powers of the spirit are also one of the ways of fighting, but Dorothea is not against Nereus using powers. She is confident in herself, and the very next moment she disarms him again and puts the sword to his neck. Sitting in the room combing her hair, the princess reassures the worried Clara that she is all right. However, unpleasant thoughts are spinning in her head. She does not understand why she needed this victory. Does she really want to go over her head again? A worried Edon enters the room, having apparently found out about what happened. Dorothea assures him that everything is fine, but she can't stop thinking that because of the water spirit, Ubera will be absorbed by Hark. Aiden is worried because the princess always says that everything is fine, but her face says that everything is completely wrong. To somehow entertain Dorothy, the boy invites her to play the violin for her, and everyone is delighted with his talent. Suddenly, the game is interrupted by a knock on the door, and the princess, recognizing the voice of Nereus in the newcomer, jumps up from her seat. Grabbing Eden by the hand, she hides him behind the curtain and orders him not to move, because he promised not to meet with Ponce. Without waiting for an invitation and pushing away Clara, who came out to meet her, Nereus unceremoniously enters Dorothea's room. Having examined her, he notices that she is not injured, and the princess orders him to briefly explain to her the purpose of his visit. Nereus apologizes for using his power on an ordinary person who cannot control spirits, and Dorothy, barely able to contain herself, accepts the apology and asks him to leave. The uninvited guest conveys to the princess an invitation from his father to attend the evening meal, where the Duke of Bronte will also be present. Dorothea doesn't want to go, but it's rude to decline the king's invitation, so she tells Clara to prepare everything she needs to go. Nereus asks who played the violin before he arrived, but Dorothy claims that he heard it and hurries out. Pons glances at Stefan, standing motionless by the curtain, who promises to catch up with them as soon as he finishes with his business. Sitting at a table with guests, King Harka tries to defuse the situation after an incident between his son and the princess. He hopes for Dorothea's understanding, and notices that she is becoming more and more like Empress Alice. The princess saw a portrait of her mother, who belonged to one of the branches of Phryade, and she liked the woman in the portrait. Leaving the estate, Dorothy is indignant at the words of the king, who hinted that the princess was not invited to the capital, even though she had recovered. Suddenly, she remembers the food that Joy brought her every month and learns that she has not heard from him for 2 months. And at this very moment, when she remembers him and wonders if something has happened, he flies up to the princess. Stefan pushes the arrogant boy away from Dorothea, but he does not give up and demands to talk to the princess. He falls to his knees in front of her and asks for help, because she promised that she would help if he ever had to sell his life. Sitting in the princess's carriage, Joy tells her that his father owes money to the mayor, and now he and his younger brother will be taken to the mine. Fearing for the boy's life, the princess agrees to help the children, but in return demands that they fulfill one condition. Dorothea visits the mayor and gives him a chest full of gold bars. The man claims that there is much more in the chest than the debt. Dorothea asks that the money be used to pay off the debts of all the children working in the mine, and that no more child labor be used. Before her rebirth, when she introduced a law banning child labor, she was much criticized. Now she is not an empress and has no right to do this, but she hopes that she could help at least someone. Joy is surprised that the princess is going to go with him after his brother. Taking Stefan with them, they all set off together, because it is unknown what could happen. Dorothea looks around in horror, looking at a poor area that she has never been to before. People around looked at the arrivals with interest, because even in simple clothes, the girl did not look like a poor woman. The princess is surprised how people can live in a house built from only slanted boards. Opening the door, they see a frightened boy sitting on the floor, Joey's brother Po. Upon learning that they are leaving this house, the child joyfully rushes into the arms of his older brother. Joy tells her brother that they are leaving their father and tells Po to say hello to the princess. Dorothy smiles tenderly at the emaciated boy, who looks at her with large green eyes. At this moment, screams are heard. Po fearfully rushes to his older brother, and Dorothy turns around towards the screams. A shabby, toothless man stands in the doorway, yelling at Stefan and demanding that the uninvited guests get out of his house. Dorothea is angry at the man who was going to sell his children to the mine, and she reveals that she is taking them with her. Grabbing Joy's hand, she hurriedly leads them behind her, away from this scoundrel. Returning to the estate, Dorothy ordered the children to be washed and changed. The princess reminds the rejoicing children that she ransomed them, and in return for paying off the debt, they must work for her. She states that they should follow her as she has work for them. The boys are brought to the dining room, where a rich table is set, decorated with flowers. The children stand rooted to the spot, because for the first time in their lives, they see such splendor, and the princess orders them to sit down. A variety of dishes are brought to the table, which makes the boys' eyes widen. Dorothea plans to teach them table etiquette, so that Joy and Po can serve her. Joy is a little scared. He doesn't know what to expect from the princess, because she might turn out to be just like Earl Duncan and make him do hard work. However, looking closely at Dorothea's calm face, he still decides that she is kind. Smiling, Joy tells the princess about her favorite dish, apple pie, and promises to someday give it to her as a token of gratitude. Returning to learning etiquette, the children eat everything on their plates and thank the princess. Suddenly, the door to the dining room opens, and a servant brings in dessert under a silver squash. It turned out to be an apple pie, which the princess asked to bring to the children for their efforts in learning etiquette. However, Joy becomes upset, both embarrassed by Dorothy's kindness and saddened by the fact that he wanted to give her the pie first. The princess reassures him and tells him that the people who work for her must be neat and healthy, so now their task is to eat well and become healthier. Dorothea wrote about all this in her letter to Theon, reading which he bursts into a smile from her kindness. He sits down at the table and reaches out to the ink to quickly answer the letter. However, the hand does not obey. It trembles. The heart beats wildly, and Theon's body ceases to obey. He is scared, not understanding what is wrong with him. Eden came to visit the princess. Clara accompanies him to the whispers of the maids touched by his beauty. Walking down the corridor, he hears the voice of Dorothea, who scolds someone for hiding a pie in the room. Opening the door, Eden sees Dorothea taking away a moldy pie from two boys, which they regret throwing away. Having learned from Clara where these children came from, Eden greets the princess and admires her action. Dorothea leaves the room, and Joy and Po are left alone with him, recognizing him because he was present at the swordsman's competition. The boys talk about Dorothea's kindness and how they are learning letters and history at the castle. Eden expresses his dissatisfaction with the fact that the children stuck to the princess like parasites. Joey claims that he's not one to sit around doing nothing. He just doesn't know how he can repay Dorothy. Good-naturedly placing his hand on the boy's shoulder, Eden shares an idea he has about this. Dorothea is sitting in the guest room sipping tea with Eden when a confused Joy and Po appear on the doorstep. They take out from behind their backs a basket of berries that they collected to please the princess. The girl accepts the gift embarrassedly. She didn't force the boys to work, but she's pleased that they took care of her. Suddenly, Dorothy notices that the basket is lined with Theon's handkerchief, which is all smeared in berry juice. The princess is angry. She scolds the boys for taking someone else's thing without asking, because this scarf means so much to her. Out of fear, Po begins to cry and tells Dorothea that it was Eden's idea to bring her sweets. Joey is angry because Eden told him to put something under the berries, but he claims that he didn't think they would take Dorothy's thing. The princess asks the boys to go out for a while, and as she leaves, Joy casts an angry glance at a grinning Eden. However, as soon as the door slams, Dorothea slaps Eden in the face. She looks him straight in the eye and understands perfectly what really happened. Eden makes a surprised face, But Dorothy suddenly realizes that they are both the same as before. She was going to change Eden in the right direction, but she can't even control herself. Before his rebirth, he had a hobby of secretly throwing his things and enjoying superiority when noble ladies bowed before him to pick up the dropped thing. Among them were those who kept his scarves, and he, watching this, laughed at them. Dorothea was the first to find out about this hobby of his, and this became the beginning of their common sin. Their anger was too closely intertwined. The tyrant who ascended the throne and her right hand, who pushed her to do so. All this then took root and eventually bore fruit, leading to the murder of Raymond. She tried to convince her friend Theon, who was crying over the corpse, that she was now the Empress. She convinced him that now he would sit on the throne next to the Empress. However, people opposed the fact that a person who did not control the spirit and killed his loved ones would be on the throne. She killed everyone who opposed her, but contrary to expectations, Theon declared her madness. Since the day of Raymond's murder, she had been tormented by insomnia every day. She was worried that people continued to hate her. However, Eden, who was always nearby, convinced her that people were mired in prejudices. Theon turned his back on Dorothea, but Eden swore that he would always be there and take care of her. Theon continued to correspond with Julia, and his face always lit up with a smile when he received a new letter. Dorothea trembled with anger, because she had much more than Julia, but Theon never smiled at her. She even decided to build a new palace for Theon to earn his favor. However, this did not help either. Dorothea learned that Theon considered her pathetic and terrible. She then became so angry that, deciding that the only thing beautiful about her was her jewelry, she tore out the earring in anger, tearing her ear. Aiden, who arrived in time, saw in horror the bleeding ear and hurried to help Dorothea. At that moment, it was reported that Theon wanted to see the Empress, and she turned around with the hope that he had finally come to her with love. However, Theon was angry. He learned that Dorothea had revoked the title of the de la Vignal family and banned them from appearing in the capital. Dorothea asked her husband to stop being interested in Julia, and Eden silently watched the scene. Having heard from the enraged Theon how much Julia meant to him, Dorothea slapped him in the face. Stating that he never swore that he would belong to her, Theon turned and walked out, with Dorothy rushing after him. However, Eden stopped her, convincing her that she would only hurt her husband's feelings, and she needed to wait a little. Holding Dorothea close to him, he promised that one day, everything she wanted so much would definitely come into her arms. The Empress gave Theon everything she had. However, the more she gave, the stronger his indifference became. One day, when Dorothea was once again thinking about how to win Theon, Eden came to her. He arrived to report that Julia was dead, having suffered an accident while wandering alone without protection. Dorothea thought that perhaps it was Eden who killed Julia for her, but she didn't care. She was already rushing to Theon, because now there was no barrier between them. The Empress found her husband in the garden. He lowered his head and held a dead bird in his hands. With tears in his eyes, he turned to Dorothea and asked if she still loved him. Kneeling down in front of her husband, Dorothy replied that she continued to love him. Dorothea, with tears in her eyes, convinced Theon that she was not involved in Julia's murder. Grabbing the Empress by the hands, Theon told her that her greed had ruined him. After some time, he committed suicide, and his shadow began to haunt Dorothea, and she could not do her work properly. In the end, the Empress, who turned the country into chaos and killed a huge number of people, was sentenced to death. Before her execution, Eden approached Dorothea to ask her about her last words. Kneeling down on one knee in front of her, he wanted her to ask him for salvation. However, Dorothea refused, because her life without Theon no longer had any meaning. Eden was furious. He could not understand what was so bad about Theon that even in the face of death, the Empress could not forget about him. Dorothea just smiled and asked Eden to become a good hero, because all this time she had only succeeded in the role of a villain. Looking at her silently, Eden pulled a crystal from his wand and handed it to the Empress, but she turned away. The next moment, an axe flashed over Dorothea's head, and the Empress was beheaded. She died with the thought that no one in the whole world loved her, and if she had known that this would happen, she would have ended it all earlier. Now Dorothea stands, clenching her fist, trembling, and does not understand why all these memories visited her right now. However, she knows one thing for sure. She and Eden are very similar, so they can only make each other worse. Being close to Eden, Dorothea is afraid to succumb to greed again and take the path of evil. Eden apologizes for being wrong and hugs the princess tightly, preventing her from leaving. He asks her to stop crying, but tears flow from his eyes. Dorothea pushes him away. She thinks that apologies are also a mask, because in his past life he never apologized. Eden regrets what he did, because he committed this act out of jealousy, wanting to be the princess's only friend. He is afraid that if Dorothea is friends with others, he will be left alone. But the princess does not know how much to trust his words. The emperor is informed of the successful visit of the delegation from Kark to Cerithian and how impressed they were with the princess. The speaker also reports on Dorothea's successes in fighting infection, charitable donations, and the development of her mind. The emperor learns that the princess has already recovered sufficiently and even took part in a fencing competition. Karnan orders Dorothea to be returned to the palace and decides to send her to the entrance exams for epistemia. He believes that the exam will allow him to understand whether the princess is really as smart as they say she is. Stefan sits in the garden, polishing his sword and thinking about the years he spent in Cerithian next to the princess. He remembers his first meeting with Dorothy when he and the other knights discovered her in the desert. Meeting the princess again at the estate, she did not recognize him, but he clearly remembered how her thin arms clung to him in the desert. Therefore, when they officially met, he did not dare to shake her hands, fearing that those thin palms would break from shaking hands. When the princess first asked to teach her how to wield a sword, Stefan was delighted, because now he was not practicing alone. Moreover, when the knight saw how well the princess trained, he understood the joy of mentoring. Stefan considered Dorothea a smart, persistent, strong girl, as if blessed by God, whom one could not help but love. However, one day the princess told him about her nightmares, and Stefan realized that the fate of this girl would never be worthy of love, since she was born by killing her own mother. Empress Alice bled to death while giving birth to Dorothy. The doctor was barely able to save the child, dying in a sea of blood, but they say that in the end, his head was cut off. Stefan doesn't understand who could tell Dorothy about this, who didn't need to know about everything, because now she's tormented by guilt. The knight regrets that he is not as sweet and open as Clara, and it is difficult for him to speak words of encouragement to the princess. Suddenly, a rustling is heard behind the bushes. Stefan gets up and sees Joey, who has fallen from fright. The boy sits next to him and asks about how Stefan became a knight. Joy would also like to become a knight, but he believes that he will not succeed because he is not from a noble family. Stefan sadly listens to the boy, thinking about something of his own, and asks him if he really wants to become a knight. Joy enthusiastically convinces Stefan of his desire, because he believes that it is cooler to die fighting the enemy than from labor in the mine. In addition, the boy believes that if he becomes a knight, he will be able to repay his debt to the princess, because she saved him. And now, Stefan is already telling Dorothea about his desire to teach Joy and asking her permission. Having received consent, Stefan asks the princess whether she will continue to engage in fencing. However, Dorothy believes that it is dangerous for her to become stronger, because holding a sword in her hands, she is overcome by the desire to win and capture. Clenching her fists and not looking Stefan in the eyes, she refuses to continue training under the pretext that she is bored. The knight sadly sees off the girl, who hastily left the room. The chef scolds Poe for hanging around the kitchen, because if the boy is hungry, all he has to do is ask. However, Poe is not hungry, he wants something else. However, he is too shy and embarrassed to ask. The chef leans over the boy to whisper his idea in his ear. The boss praises the joyful Poe for what he said and promises to help him as much as necessary. Eden lies on the bed in his room and cries, saddened that the princess is angry with him and refuses him admission. He wants to do something that will make Dorothy happy, and suddenly a wonderful thought occurs to him. There are flowers in Cerithian that shine in the night, but there are no such flowers in other places, and people often come to find them. Eden decides to go in search of flowers. It has already become dark, and he regrets that he did not take a servant with him. However, he discards these thoughts since he must do this only on his own, so that the princess will rejoice thanks only to him. And finally, Eden finds a flower. It grows on a rocky, steep mountain slope. Clutching Theon's handkerchief, Dorothy thinks that, despite Eden's apologies, she doesn't want to see him yet. There is a knock on the door, and Clara appears on the threshold along with the Bronte family maid, who is looking for the boy. Dorothy finds out that he went looking for a flower for her and never returned. Eden, clinging to sharp stones, climbs the sheer cliff, and now he has almost reached it. Making a final push, he grabs the stems and pulls out the flowers, admiring them with a fascinated gaze. Suddenly, the sole of his shoe slips, and before he knows it, Eden is flying down the cliff. Concerned, Dorothea, accompanied by Stefan, goes into the forest in search of Eden, constantly shouting his name. There is absolute darkness all around, and suddenly, the princess sees some kind of glow in the distance behind the bushes. Coming closer and parting the bushes, she sees Eden sitting on the ground, wiping away tears with one hand and holding flowers in the other. When he sees Dorothy, he turns away from her because he doesn't want to appear so dirty and ugly to her. The princess cleans Eden's face from dirt with her sleeve. She understands that because of the past, she did not look at him at all in the present. She doesn't care at all what he looks like now, because for her sake, he went in search of a flower, risking his life. Dorothea weaves a flower into her hair. She realizes that the beauty of Eden's soul is important to her, and not what he looks like. She places the second bud behind the boy's ear and joyfully thanks him for the gift. For the past few days, Joy and Poe had been avoiding Dorothy. As soon as they made eye contact, they flinched and ran away. And then there is a knock on the door of the princess's room, and on the threshold stand Joy and Poe, who is holding a plate with a piece of apple pie. As an apology for his behavior, Joy, as promised, gives the princess a pie that the cook helped the brothers prepare. Dorothy is delighted with the pie, because before no food has brought her as much pleasure as one that was prepared with her in mind. She thanks the boys. They jump with happiness, because they managed to please the princess, and at that moment, someone comes in. Turning, Dorothea sees an imperial knight who has arrived to give her orders from Karnan. The princess is informed of the emperor's order to return to the capital, since her health has already been restored. Out of anger, Dorothy even drops the pie from her hands, because everyone who cares about her is in Cerithian. The princess tells the emperor that she will stay at the estate until Joy and Poe bake her a new pie. Raymond silently runs after Theon, walking along the corridor, and joyfully falls onto his shoulders. Out of surprise, the boy pushes his attacker away, not immediately recognizing him as a friend. Ray notices that Theon's hands are shaking very much. He is worried about his condition, because the boy even missed his history lesson. Julia appears in the corridor, calling Theon, and the two of them leave to talk in private. Ray sees that something is happening to his friend, but hopes that there is nothing serious, and Theon will soon tell everything himself. Sitting over a cup of tea, Julia notices that Theon looks especially tired today. He tells her about how he went for a walk at dawn, but suddenly his vision went dark, and the bird he was looking at died. Grabbing his hair, he realized his guilt, and that he had killed the bird without meaning to. Theon again grabs his hair, a trembling again pierces his body. Julia rushes to him. He apologizes, calms down, and shares his concern with Julia, not understanding where he got such strength from. At some point, strange symptoms began to appear, and at first, it was just a light trembling in the darkness. But gradually, this power of the spirit of darkness became greater and began to kill first small insects, and now a small bird. In the Fried family, which entered into a contract with the spirits of darkness, no one has received this power for almost 100 years. And now, feeling its awakening within himself, Theon is afraid of harming someone. Julia reassures him, because generations have passed, and the blood of the Fried family has become very diluted, so Theon will not become so strong as to harm a person. Julia advises him to also tell Ray about everything, because he can control the spirit of light and may be able to help Theon. But he had already asked Ray about power and learned that the prince had been communicating with the spirit from the very beginning. But with Theon, everything is different. The spirit appears, does what it wants, and disappears. In addition, to control the spirit, you need a high degree of intimacy with it, and Theon does not have this. The boy remembers that the power came into him when he was about to write a letter to Dorothy. He hopes that he will learn to control the power before his next meeting with the princess. Clara informs Dorothea of a letter she has received, inviting her to a meeting in the Countess Duncan's salon. The princess also learns that this time someone will be making their debut in high society. Over dinner, the Duke of Bronte began to think that Princess Dorothea was showing great interest in his illegitimate son. He knows that the princess refused visits to other noble children of her age, but she often spends time with Eden. The Duke considers it a good chance if a scandal occurs between his son with an unfortunate origin and the princess. He orders the maid to urgently call the Duchess to share his thoughts with her. After all, an illegitimate son and a princess unwanted by his father can become a wonderful couple. Without waiting for the Duchess to arrive, the angry Duke himself follows her into the room. Having learned that her husband is planning to bring Eden into high society, since Princess Dorothea is interested in him, the Duchess is beside herself with rage. She is ashamed that the Duke decided to trumpet to the whole world that he slept with a woman from a bar, fathered a child with her, and is now raising him. She assures that she has always treated the boy no worse than her son, and by allowing him to be taken away, she has already given him all her moral debt, and she does not agree to more. Bronte believes that Aiden is old enough to face the world, and he suggests that the Duchess fears for Jonathan's place. The Duchess is sure that she will be ashamed to look people in the face if she brings out a child conceived by her husband with another woman. She tells her husband that she thinks Eden is very cute, but she will never be able to love this child. At this moment, the sound of a cup breaking on the floor is heard, which was dropped from the hands of Eden, who became an accidental witness to the scandal. The boy freezes for a moment and then runs away from the room as fast as he can, not stopping to answer his father's call. Entering his son's room, the Duke finds him in tears. The boy is annoyed that his parents are embarrassed of him. Bronte tries to convince Eden, who does not understand why they are hiding him and fighting over him. He thinks that the reason for this is that he disappointed his parents and did not enter the epistemic school. He begged the Duchess to take him to the exam so much that she gave in, but there was an accident on the way and they never got there. Eden believes that he is not to blame for his mother's low origins, so he does not understand why they fight because of him. The Duke assures the boy that he is innocent of anything and promises to formally introduce him as his son at a reception with Countess Duncan. The boy knows that his father and Duchess sincerely care about him, and the man realizes that he paid little attention to this precocious child. Princess Dorothea enters the Countess's estate, and everyone immediately showers her with so many compliments that she already regrets coming. She is distracted from the noisy ladies by the Duke of Bronte, who comes up to say hello and express his respect. Suddenly, Eden comes out from behind him. The princess is stunned by his appearance. She is surprised, because before her rebirth, Eden first appeared in high society only after Jonathan, who died during a hunt. Dorothea does not understand what mental changes have happened to the Duke of Bronte, because until then, they constantly hid him. The princess is happy about Eden's debut and sincerely congratulates him on his first appearance. The boy was relieved to meet Dorothea here because he was worried, not knowing how to behave among strangers. The princess is sure that Eden will quickly get used to it, but his father calls the boy to the beginning of the event. Eden kisses the princess's hand and asks her forgiveness for having to leave her. Standing among the crowd, Dorothea hears the ladies whispering, blaming the Duke and admiring the generosity of Madame Bronte. But Dorothy knows that soon everyone will go crazy with the desire to approach him, because in his past life, his influence in high society was enormous, so much so that depending on whether Eden came to the ball, the number of visitors changed significantly, and this became his power. Countess Duncan learns of a musician's injury, as a result of which he will not be able to perform, and is afraid that there is no one to replace him. Eden, who accidentally witnessed the conversation, offers the Countess his candidacy for the role of pianist. The boy apologizes for his tactlessness and introduces himself as the youngest son of the Bronte family. The Countess laughingly asks Eden if he can perform Beethoven, since it is difficult for an ordinary person to play this composition. Eden claims that he rehearsed this composition every day and asks Mrs. Duncan to give him a chance. Dorothea sips her juice in boredom and wonders where Eden has gone. Suddenly, the hubbub of the crowd subsides, and, turning around, the princess sees Eden sitting at the piano. The song fascinates the girl. It seems to her that Eden plays it as if he wants her to hear it. Dorothea thinks that perhaps if Eden had become a musician, rather than a minister, he would have been happier. But he was very ambitious. Those present applaud the young talent, and he, finding the princess in the crowd, enthusiastically waves to her. Dorothea goes out onto the balcony to be quiet, but hears the ladies gossiping about how Eden waved to the princess. She is outraged that people are minding their own business, discussing how she and he are the perfect couple, and at that moment, Eden approaches her. Dorothy is sure that there is nothing good in their words, because their couple is ideal in that the abandoned Milaneo and the illegitimate Bronte are two natural geniuses who cannot sparkle brightly. Now the ladies are discussing in a whisper that the princess cannot summon the spirit, and they are prophesying the end of the imperial palace. Suddenly, from somewhere on the balcony, bright red juice, sticky with sweetness, pours onto one of the ladies. Looking up, they see Aiden Bronte apologizing for accidentally knocking over a glass while trying to put it on the railing. Eden states that the Freeds have not been able to summon the spirit of darkness for over 100 years, but they still hold the power, meaning that if someone from Milano cannot summon the spirits, it will not cause the empire to fall. Clenching her fists, Dorothea asks Eden to stop because she believes that Milaneo, who does not see spirits, is not Milaneo. Bowing, the ladies make excuses that they only feel sorry for the princess because she was left in Sarishan and has not been called to the palace for several years. The princess leaves, assuring the ladies that there is no need to feel sorry for her because she is so unhappy that someone's heart ache for her. Aden throws the glass on the ground, a few steps away from the high society gossips, and follows the princess. Dorothea wants to return to where there are people who care about her: Stefan, Clara, Joy, and Poe. However, her path is blocked by a knight who appears out of nowhere, announcing the arrival of the imperial carriage. He reads out Karnan's order, which states that the princess has already recovered her health and therefore must return. Dorothy realizes that if she refuses, she will again receive the yoke of a rebel, so she asks for at least time to prepare. The knight must carry out the order without delay, but Dorothy asks him to at least let her say goodbye. The princess realizes that everyone she cares about, except Clara, will remain in Cerithian, and she worries about Joy and Poe. Dorothea asks for a couple of minutes to write letters for Clara and the boys. Eden enters the room and invites the princess to personally deliver the letter to the castle. The boy asks Dorothy not to worry, because he will properly fulfill everything she instructs him to do. The princess thinks that this time Eden will not act badly again, and asks him to give the letter to Clara. Eden congratulates the princess on her return to Lampas and asks not to say goodbye, as if they were seeing each other for the last time. Coming closer and smiling, Dorothy promises that they will definitely meet again. Eden reminds her of the debutante ball, where he will be her partner, and until then, he promises to wait only for this day. Before Dorothy leaves, Aiden pulls her in, hugs her tightly, and kisses her on the forehead goodbye. Raymond is worried that Theon is hiding something from him. He thinks that his friend fell in love with Julia and they left him alone. With these thoughts, he walks along the corridor, and suddenly, through the open door, he hears the sound of breaking glass. Ray opens the door and sees Theon sitting on the floor. He is shaking all over and looks very exhausted. The prince rushes to his friend, and he asks the prince to help him learn to handle the spirit as he wants. Dorothea arrived at the castle for the first time in 3 years, but nothing had changed. Neither the castle nor Karnan. The emperor believes that it is time for the girl to return to the castle, but Dorothea sees no reason to be there. Karnan promises to change his mind about his daughter if she passes the entrance exams to epistemia. Previously, Dorothy would have been delighted by these words and began to study hard, but now she does not see the point in this and refuses. The enraged emperor did not plan to give Dorothy a choice. He orders her to take the exams. The princess agrees to take the exam, but refuses the teacher offered by the emperor. Lying in her room, Dorothea thinks about how important it was for her to know all the exam topics by heart before, and how it doesn't matter now. A bored Raymond flies into the room and rushes to his sister, and she, as usual, pushes him away. The prince gives Dorothy a bouquet of flowers as a welcome gift. Ray is inspired by the fact that his sister will enter epistemia. He is looking forward to going there with her and introducing her to friends. Dorothy again reproaches her brother for coming, instead of studying to chat with her about all sorts of nonsense. Clara is horrified by how suddenly the princess was summoned to the capital. She, clutching her head, rushes around the house, collecting her things. Upon learning that Dorothy is leaving, Joy and Poe are upset, because now they will have to return home to their father. With his face buried in his older brother's chest, Poe cries because he doesn't want to go back. In this bustle, they are all caught by Eden, who has arrived to fulfill the princess's request. He gives the letter to Clara, who after reading it, admires the resourcefulness and kindness of the princess. The boys learn that Dorothea ordered them to also go to Lampas with Clara. Clenching his hands in envy, Eden says goodbye, refusing Clara's offer to stay for sweets. The boy leaves, but Joy and Poe catch up with him in the hallway, thanking him for the letter and apologizing for being angry with him. Noting the boy's luck, Eden orders them to try not to disgrace the princess and leaves. A month later, Dorothea stands in Kernan's office among exam forms scattered all over the floor. The emperor is furious that the princess scored 0 points, a score that no one has ever had before in the entire history of episteme. Dorothea assures her father that she did everything possible because she set a record that has never been seen before. She reproaches the emperor for the fact that the death of his wife was more important to him than the birth of his daughter, and in her entire life, she did not receive a single gift from him. Unable to bear the princess's suggestion that he would rather his daughter die than his wife, Karnan shouts at her. Dorothea asks the emperor if he wanted her to die when she was kidnapped several years ago, and receives a resounding slap in the face for this question. The princess accuses him of never hugging her because he doesn't consider her his child. She asks not to call her Princess Milaneo in the future, because this name does not give her a blessing. Before taking her leave, Dorothy also asks that she not be invited to events or ceremonies. The girl leaves the room, glad that this happened, because now even the small remaining affection of her father for her has disappeared. Stefan runs up to Dorothea and is horrified to notice the redness on her cheek, but she assures her that everything is fine. However, the next moment, the girl bursts into bitter tears. She no longer wants to stay in the capital and wants to go back to the castle by the sea. Stefan hugs and hugs Dorothy tightly, who, bursting into tears, wants to disappear from this world. And now she is already crying bitterly on his shoulders, asking him to take her away from here. With eyes swollen from tears, with a mark from a slap, the princess, smiling, thanks Stefan for being there. The knight smiles and strokes the girl's head, and her soul is much calmer. On the way, they meet Theon, who calls out to the princess and starts a conversation with her. Dorothea feels awkward because once again she appears before Theon in a form in which she does not want to appear. After listening to Dorothy's assurances that she is fine, he takes a tube of medicine from his pocket and advises applying it to her cheek. The princess takes the medicine, thanks Theon for his help, and saying goodbye, leaves. Looking after her, the boy thinks about who could have hit Dorothy, and worried about her, decides to ask. However, the power of darkness reappears, and Theon's whole body trembles, and he decides to be careful when meeting people. Dorothy looks at the medicine that Theon gave, but for some reason, she thinks about Eden. She thinks of writing him a letter and telling him about what happened, because Eden always listened carefully to her stories, like a very close friend. Dorothea picks up the mahogany box and admires the contents. She decides to include a bookmark in the letter, which she made from a flower given by Eden to make him happy. The princess is thinking about writing about her miserable, lonely existence in the palace, or about the fact that her only parent wants her dead. Thinking it was no use, she changes her mind and slams the box shut. Eden squats in the garden, saddened by the lack of news from the princess. He is jealous of the guys who went to see her in Lampas, because he already misses Dorothy so much. Remembering the words of the princess, Karnan thinks that he would never prefer her death, because what kind of father wants his daughter to die at the hands of kidnappers? However, in reality, if it was possible to save Alice on the day Dorothy was born, at the cost of the girl's life, he would agree. Every time Karnan looks at his daughter, he remembers how his wife died in his arms, and he cannot be affectionate. He thinks about how eerily similar Dorothy is to her mother, and how he might develop some feelings for her. However, the girl cannot summon spirits, and this puts the imperial family at risk. The emperor is upset that the child whom Alice gave birth to at the cost of her life is not able to summon a single spirit. Raymond is very upset by the news that Dorothea failed the exam for the academy. He tells Theon that she received the lowest grade, 0 points on the test. The boy is sure that the princess failed the exam not out of stupidity, but on the contrary, out of great intelligence, having done it on purpose. Theon shares the news with his friend that he has managed to suppress his power, and now he is less worried about harming someone. However, Raymond is concerned that if Theon continues to suppress the spirit of darkness, it could harm him. The spirit of darkness is associated with death, and the more Theon suppresses it, the less vitality it has. Raymond found old books in the Imperial Library and studied some facts. He shows Theon the story of how the first Milaneo and the first Freed made a bloody contract with the Spirit King. Milaneo created the sun by making a wish for the spirit of light, and Freed signed the spirit of darkness by throwing a curtain to escape the sun. Having learned that light and darkness were one, and families balanced each other, stabilizing the forces. Ray offers Theon help. The prince promises to find out how they can stabilize their powers, so that the spirit of light will suppress the spirit of darkness. Loaded with boxes and things, Clara hurries to the princess, since the move took longer than she expected. Not noticing Stefan appearing on the way, the maid bumps into him, drops the boxes, and ends up in the arms of the knight. Dorothy comes out to meet them, upset that she did not have time to prepare for their arrival. Clara rushes to hug the princess, notices a mark on her cheek, and offers to quickly apply the medicine. Joy and Poe are also concerned about Dorothea's appearance, they vying with each other to ask what happened to her. And then the girl realizes that it was not about returning to Sarishan, but about the people who care about her. She joyfully welcomes them, because her home is now where these people are. All of them, along with Stefan, rush to hug the princess. She is happy because she is again surrounded by dear people. Sitting over a cup of tea, Dorothy reflects on how good it is that everyone came, because she feels uncomfortable being around Karnan. Joy and Poe approach her to see how they can help, and Dorothy orders them to live as before, just not to go to other palaces and practice more etiquette. Theon and Raymond enter the room, who came to support his sister because he is worried about her mood lately. Theon compliments Dorothy, and she finds herself seeing that, thanks to his friendliness, the memories of his death are gradually fading. Raymond notices the boys standing aside and asks his sister who they are. The boys are in awe of the fact that the crown prince is talking to them, but Ray treats them with a simplicity not typical of a prince. Dorothy realizes that maybe this isn't such a bad thing, since she's always been jealous of his brightness and how well-loved he is. Dorothea is already 16 years old. She is walking through the garden and suddenly hears Clara calling her. Out of breath, the maid runs up to the princess to inform her, to ask her for a few days of leave. As it turned out, Clara's father, who had been ill in recent years, died this morning. Dorothy sympathizes with the maid and regrets that she did not know about this earlier, in order to give her more time to spend with her sick father. Clara is touched by her mistress's understanding and kindness, but Dorothy does not think so, because she knows nothing about the life of her maid. The princess orders someone to be sent to help Clara organize the funeral and a wreath on Dorothea's behalf. However, she learns that only ministers known to nobles are allowed to send a wreath from the imperial family. Dorothy orders the wreath to be sent anyway, and plans to appear in person at the funeral, so that Clara, who has cared for her all these years, will be there. Dorothea is not afraid of the prospect of appearing on the street where commoners live, because she cannot leave a person important to her in a difficult moment. Clara thinks about how much she needs to prepare for tomorrow's funeral. She is distracted from her work by an unexpected knock on the door. She is surprised, because she is not expecting anyone. Clara opens the door and sees Stefan on the threshold, who has come to help her. Those gathered in the funeral hall are whispering about the wreath sent on behalf of the imperial family. Clara stands in the hall and thanks Stefan for his help, because thanks to the princess, organizing the funeral was easy. She learns from the knight that he himself volunteered to help her because he was worried about her after hearing her cry. The imperial carriage approaches the funeral hall, and the princess appears, dressed in a mourning dress. Dorothy apologizes for arriving late, but Clara is so moved that she does not know how to thank the princess. She hugs the girl tightly and promises that she will live with her for the rest of her life. After the funeral, the delegation went to Clara's home to drink tea. Dorothea learns that her maid has an older brother, but he is in no condition to receive guests. At this moment, the door to the next room opens, and Clara's brother, Anton, appears on the threshold in a wheelchair. He introduces himself and apologizes to the princess for the inconvenience. Anton thanks Dorothea for her condolences and for the way she takes care of his sister. The princess claims that she considers Clara her family, because family is not just people connected by blood, but someone more important. Embarrassed, Clara leaves the living room to prepare another batch of tea. Anton thanks the princess for loving his sister with all her heart and seeing her true character. He talks about his illness, due to which he cannot work, because he knows how to sew, but people do not buy things made by cripples. Having learned about Anton's sewing abilities, Dorothea is struck by the idea of how she can help him. Meanwhile, Clara sits sad and embarrassed in the yard, hugging her knees. Stefan comes out to her to check if everything is okay. As it turned out, Clara did not want to introduce her brother to Stefan and the princess, since until now everyone had neglected him. Clara is ashamed. She thinks that she deceived Dorothy, because she does not consider herself good. With tears in her eyes, she tells how she was tired of her sick father and brother and did not want to return home from the castle. Stefan silently hugs Clara and holds her close to calm her down. He understands that it was hard for the girl to bear this burden alone, and there is nothing to blame her for. The knight speaks of Clara's kindness, which the princess saw, and the girl feels better in his arms. Saying goodbye to the maid, Dorothea asks to contact Stefan if help is needed. The princess reports that she will be busy for some time, as she has an important matter. Sitting in her office, Dorothea works hard on a plan to create a support center for the disabled. She dreams of creating a program to provide funds for treatment and regular medical care. Dorothy also wants to create a community where people with similar problems can communicate, but this requires permission from the emperor. The princess recalls how she planned to create such a center even before her rebirth, but the nobility perceived the idea negatively. People from the highest circles believed that they needed to invest in a business that could benefit the palace. Carnonu also called the idea of a princess a useless endeavor. He said that mediocre people are of no use. Dorothea did not understand how one could treat others poorly just because they were not beneficial. Then she thinks that if she had power, no one would dare to look down on her. These thoughts frighten Dorothea because she promised herself not to wish for much, but she continues to do so. Distressed that nothing has changed and feeling hopeless, the girl gets up from the table. Ray enters the room and, noticing Dorothy's papers, asks permission to look at her plan. After reading his sister's work, the prince is delighted. He wants to conduct an analysis and begin implementing the plan. Dorothea believes that most likely she will not succeed, because for this she needs the emperor's permission. Raymond offers his sister help. He promises to talk to his father, because it is difficult for Dorothy to do this. The princess believes that the emperor can listen to Ray and wants to try. For the sake of Clara and Anton, Raymond promises to talk to the emperor, because he is ready to fulfill any request of his sister. However, in return, he has a condition. Dorothea must thank him and hug him. The princess refuses, but Ray doesn't back down. He doesn't understand why Dorothy can't hug him for once. Distressed Raymond lies face down on the floor. It hurts him that his sister never did this and did not love him since he was 1 year old. Dorothy remembers being irritated after her rebirth when her brother picked her up. She doesn't understand why her hugs are so important to Ray and what they mean to him. He believes that this is an agreement to take another step towards a relationship in which they will understand each other a little more. When asked to fulfill some other request of her brother, Ray asks her to kiss her on the cheek. Dorothy agrees, but promises to fulfill the request only after the prince receives permission from the emperor. With the hope that the princess's heart has opened a little more for him, Ray heads to her father's office. On the way, he stops at a portrait of his mother, and the very first memory pops up in his head. His late mother in a coffin and his father looking at her. Instead of his mother, his younger sister came into this world, a special child, Dorothea Milaneo. Raymond hugged her, afraid of losing someone else close to her, and promised to always protect his little sister. Looking at the portrait of his mother, the prince promises that he will take care of Dorothy and will do everything possible for this. After reviewing the papers, the emperor is interested in why Raymond decided to spend the imperial budget on such an insignificant matter as helping the disabled. He considers such waste unnecessary, but Ray argues that it is very important. The emperor demands that the prince not give in to trifles and always think about profit, because the most important thing is the prosperity of the empire. Ray insists that the prosperity of the people is the prosperity of the empire. Without the people, there is no point in the existence of the emperor. Hearing the name of Dorothea, who is involved in this plan, Karnan becomes furious. He does not consider the girl part of the Milaneo family and thinks that she is opposed to them. Raymond does not agree with his father because she is not like that at all. He accuses the emperor of not being interested in his daughter at all. Karnan remains silent, but with all his appearance, he shows Ray that he will not rely on the girl's opinion when making a decision. The emperor claims that the name Milaneo is more significant than it seems, and that it is not worth appearing to people for a while and then disappearing, because it is impossible to shine for everyone all the time. Ray feels like the emperor doesn't understand that Dorothy is trying to create a world where everyone has equal rights and helps each other. The prince insists that he turn to the emperor precisely because the name Milaneo has power. He claims that Dorothea made this plan because she knows that the family has power, money, and strength that can help people. Raymond does not understand what is the point of the Milaneo family if they only seek power, but his father informs him of the critical situation in the family. The Emperor is unhappy with Dorothea's inability to summon spirits, because this could lead to the fall of Milaneo. Ray does not like that his father considers the princess mediocre, and does not understand why he hates her so much. Carnal reminds his son of the Fried family, who have lost the ability to communicate with spirits, and therefore power is in the hands of Milaneo. However, due to Dorothy's lack of power, the imperial power is at risk, so the Emperor advises Ray to take care of those who do not have flaws. The prince does not understand how human hearts can be weighed on scales, because they are all citizens of Ubera. Considering the conversation with his son completed, the Emperor turns around and leaves the room. Raymond is saddened that he will not be able to help people because the Emperor relies only on the power of the spirits. The prince went to Dorothea, not knowing how to tell her about the Emperor's refusal. He tells her the bad news, but insists that the princess proceed with her plan anyway. He promises to take responsibility for this decision, but Dorothy considers this crazy. Ray proposes to pretend that he willfully conveyed a false permission from the Emperor. He also offers his sister his money, knowing that she does not have enough funds to implement the plan. Joking that he won't be kicked out for this, since he is the only crown prince, Ray immediately regrets his words. Dorothy grabs him by the collar of his shirt and shakes him furiously, not understanding why her brother is so desperately trying to help her. Taking her hands in his, the prince claims that he simply likes to fulfill his sister's wishes. He wants her to reveal her talents and abilities, and therefore helps her. Dorothea can't wrap her head around why Raymond loves her so much, because he has every reason to hate his sister. She confesses her sin that she always hated him because she was jealous. Dorothy wants the prince to ignore her like Kernan and the other aristocrats. Ray apologizes to her sister with a smile on her face for not being able to hate her. He feels happy because Dorothy considers herself bad only because she is jealous of what she says about her kindness. Ray believes that truly bad people do not feel guilty no matter what happens and never repent. He is sure that Dorothea is not like that, and tightly hugs his sister, who still has difficulty believing that she can be called kind. However, at some point, her heart melts, and she hugs her brother tightly, apologizing and pouring bitter tears into his shoulder. Raymond is in a good mood, and Theon and Julia, noticing this, ask what happened to the prince. He talks about his tender feelings for his sister, and how they are working together to create a support center. Having witnessed a conversation between friends, Nereus Ponce laughs at the idea of opening a center for the disabled. He calls the project crazy, but Raymond, as usual, does not take his words to heart. Nereus believes that money needs to be invested wisely, and is sure that the Emperor will never allow such stupidity. Pons believes that the prince should have been kicked out of the epistemic a long time ago, because he is a poor student and wastes time on useless ideas. Without losing her dignity, Ray thanks Nereus for taking care of other people's problems and hints to him to mind his own business. Pons reminds that the imperial family is declining, and Theon stands up for his friends. Nereus is reminded that he lost in battle to this same princess, who has no connection with the spirits. Raymond, still smiling, advises Ponce to mind his own affairs and the affairs of the Kingdom of Hark. Leaving Nereus alone with his evil thoughts, Ray, Theon, and Julia leave the room. Dorothea discusses with Ray the need to change people's perceptions and stop discrimination against people with disabilities. While thinking about how to improve the opinion of people with disabilities, Ray comes up with an idea. A year later, the support center that Raymond and Dorothea put so much effort into is finally created. They had many difficulties along the way, but by collaborating with Anton and the others, they managed to complete everything. Looking at her creation with pride, Dorothea remembers Eden when an inspired Raymond approaches her. She thanks her brother because everything they achieved was achieved thanks to him. A year ago, the prince had a great idea, as a result of which their plans came true. As a sign of gratitude, Dorothy extends her hand to Raymond because she appreciates his contribution to her dream business. Ray grabs her sister and hugs her tightly, not paying attention to the people crowding around her. However, the prince is so proud that Dorothy is his sister that he does not care what they think of him. The princess understands that Ray is one of those who believes in her beliefs to the very end and lovingly hugs her brother to her. Idan increasingly appears in high society and amazes everyone with his musical abilities. Everyone praises the guy so much that the Duke of Bronte even regrets that he did not bring him into the world earlier. Realizing that great hopes can be placed on Eden, The Duke decides to invite his son to enter the epistemic school. He invites the guy to follow his older brother to enroll. However, Eden, having thanked his father for his care, refuses, because now his interests have changed. In addition, Eden believes that while Jonathan is studying, parents need a son who will help them in the absence of the elder. The Duke of Bronte is touched by his son's words. He reports that he is very proud of him. While attending social gatherings, Eden found out that the princess did not enter the epistemic school and even received the lowest score. Some aristocrats thought she was stupid, but Eden was amused by the princess's eccentricity because since she was able to mark all the wrong answers, it turns out that she knew all the correct options. Thinking about the princess, an involuntary smile appeared on the guy's face. He tried very hard and changed himself to become someone who would be suitable for the princess. Raymond happily informs the princess that he was among the top 50 students, taking 49th place on the list. Dorothea treats his joy with irony because this is not the best result for the crown prince. Theon, who took first place on this list, is pleased to notice how the princess has changed and how bright and joyful she has become. He plucks up courage and invites Dorothea to go to Phrygia this summer. Theon talks about how Phrygia is a very quiet place with a lake covered in fog. Dorothy remembers going there with him before she was reborn, thinking he would feel better once he was home. Theon is sure that if the princess goes to Phrygia, the place will become more joyful. Dorothea does not understand why he is so kind to her in this life, where she decided to give up her love, but agrees to the trip. Raymond joyfully pounces on his friend, shaming him for not inviting Theon to join them. And so Dorothy goes to Phrygia, deciding that this will be a farewell trip in which she will forever abandon Theon. She and Raymond look fascinated at the fog enveloping the city, which was formed due to an agreement with the spirit of darkness. Seeing the Fried family's castle through the window, Dorothy thought that now this place looks different than in her previous life. She tells herself that she needs to stop worrying and behave naturally. The carriage stops, the door opens, and Theon offers his hand to the princess to help her down. Having lowered Dorothea from the carriage, the guy joyfully welcomes the girl as his guest. Theon's mother, Duchess Fried, greeting the guests, notes that they are very lucky with the weather, because clear days rarely happen there. Dorothea thanks the Duchess for the reception and for the rooms prepared for her and her brother. Ray comes running and grabs the princess by the hand and drags her along for a walk. Dorothea has been sitting on the shore for a whole hour and looking at the backs of the guys fishing by the lake. Ray is happy with the fish she caught and, showing it to her sister, offers to cook it for dinner. Dorothy looks at her brother with tenderness. She understands that she is ready to sit like this for a long time, since Ray is having so much fun. Suddenly, Julia approaches the guys, having prepared a snack for her friends. Raymond brings Dorothy a bucket of his catch and jokes that he is ready to give up his throne to become a fisherman. While Julia tells everyone stories from Theon's childhood, the guy extends his hand to Dorothea and invites her to go fishing. The princess decides to allow herself to daydream a little during her final meeting with Theon and extends her hand to him in return. Raymond also wants to go fishing, but Julia insists that he eat first. Dorothy watches as Theon repeatedly pulls all sorts of garbage out of the lake and becomes convinced that he really doesn't know how to fish. He says that he goes fishing only because he just likes this lake. Dorothy remembers that in her previous life, she did not know that he liked this lake because he was always silent. Suddenly, Theon says that fishing now is an opportunity to be alone with the princess. At this very moment, Dorothea is bitten by such a big fish that she is afraid that the fishing line will break. Grabbing the girl from behind, Theon helps her pull out the hooked fish. They lose their balance, and in a moment, Theon finds himself on the ground, with Dorothea falling on top. By chance, their lips touch for a split second. The princess looks at Theon in surprise and fear. Stefan, who was nearby, runs towards them, worried that the princess will not get hurt. Dorothy assures her that she is fine and asks Stefan not to miss the huge fish. Theon and the princess are sitting on the ground near the fish with the catch and casually chatting about fishing. Dorothy doesn't understand why he doesn't say anything about the kiss and doesn't seem to care. She thinks it was just an accident and refuses Eden's offer to continue fishing. Dorothea asks Stefan to accompany her, explaining that she needs some rest. The princess lies on the ground, looks at the sunset, and thinks about what a fool she is, because she came to end her feelings. Theon is leaning over her, wanting to talk to the princess about something. He asks her why Dorothy agreed to his invitation, because he always had the feeling that she was building an invisible wall between them. The princess assures Theon that her cold behavior is caused only by extreme caution, thinking that she does not want a repeat of her past life. Dorothy smiles and says that she only wants happiness for him. Putting his hand on her shoulder, Theon admits that he also wants only happiness for the princess. However, she looks at him and again remembers the past and how she destroyed him then. Dorothea has tears streaming from her eyes, and Theon doesn't understand why she gets sad every time she hears something like this from him. He approaches her, wipes the girl's eyes with his hand, and asks her to stop crying. Dorothy is hurt that Theon is so gentle with her, but she gathers strength because he cannot ruin everything. The princess takes out her pocket and hands Theon his handkerchief and a bottle of medicine. The guy doesn't understand why Dorothea is returning these things to him, because she can keep them for herself. Dorothea refuses, and looking at Theon, realizes that she is now ready to finally let him go. She did everything she couldn't in her previous life. And now Theon sits in front of her, clutching his things in his hands and promising to keep them. Dorothea thought that parting with Tan would be painful, and she would regret it. But it didn't turn out that way. She stands on the balcony and looks at the night sky. And suddenly, fixing her gaze on the brightest star, she remembers flowers from Eden. The next morning, the prince and princess, accompanied by Stefan, stroll around Phrygia before heading back to the castle. They are chatting casually when someone behind them asks them to turn around. In front of them stands a little girl who sells shell jewelry that can only be found in Phrygia. It turns out that the girl makes her own jewelry, and each of them is made with love for a loved one. Dorothea buys jewelry, and approaching Stefan, asks him to lean towards her. The night goes down to the girl, and she pins one of the purchased decorations on his cap. Dorothy bought gifts for other people dear to her, and now she is happily going home. A year later, epistemic graduation day arrives, and everyone congratulates the prince on graduating. Dorothea comes to congratulate her brother with a bouquet of flowers that she chose especially for him. Raymond is deeply touched, but Dorothy is again angry at him for showing his feelings in public. The prince boasts to his sister that he is graduating from epistemia, already in 32nd place. And now a young man on the balcony asks for a minute of attention to announce the start of the graduation ceremony. Dorothea turns around and recognizes the graduate as Theon, noting to herself how much he has grown since they last saw each other. The princess is happy to realize that after her trip to Phrygia, her unfulfilled love could become her good friend. The crowd is in turmoil as everyone looks for partners for the debutante ball. The Ubra Debutante Ball was an event where the entire aristocratic society gathered and held it after graduation. Raymond asks his sister if she has chosen a partner, and Dorothy does not know what to answer. She recalls how in a past life she was never able to find a partner, and, standing alone, heard gossip behind her back. Then Theon stood up for her, declaring himself the princess's partner, and never after that giving the appearance that he was forced to do this. Dorothy tells Ray that she can do without a partner, but he does not understand how he can go to the ball without a gentleman. Nereus Ponce appears before them and invites the princess to accompany her. Dorothy, looking intently at the approaching one, does not want to rush into a decision and informs Nereus about this. However, he is sure that in her position, the princess will not be able to find anyone better than him, so he came to the aid of the one in need. At this moment, a familiar hand rests on Dorothea's shoulder, and she hears a familiar voice behind her. Putting his arm around Dorothy's shoulders, Eden reveals that the princess already has a partner for the evening. Eden leans over the girl and kisses her forehead. They haven't seen each other for a long time, and he missed her. He hopes that she remembers her promise, because the princess did not write to him, and he was afraid that she had forgotten him. Dorothea hurries to convince Eden that she did not forget, and the guy again hugs the girl to himself. Raymond, who caught this scene, angrily attacks Eden, pushing him away from Dorothy. Eden apologizes and introduces himself to the prince as the second son of the Duke of Bronte. Nereus is furious because some low and pathetic bastard is taking his partner. He reproaches Eden for not even being a student and having no right to be at the graduation. Nereus makes Eden laugh, but he responds to all the grins with decent calm. He didn't go to an academy and didn't learn how to attack people and elevate himself above others. Unable to restrain himself, Nereus angrily gives Eden a ringing slap in the face. Dorothea screams in fear. Raymond blocks Eden. He suggests that Nereus is still angry with Dorothea for defeating him in the past. The prince kicks Ponce out, and he, gritting his teeth, leaves, promising that there won't be a next time. Dorothea worries if Aiden is okay, because there is a burning mark on his cheek from a slap. The princess, under the pretext that she needs to talk to Eden, takes him away, but now they are awkwardly silent, waiting for the doctor. Dorothea begins to talk about Nereus, but Eden interrupts her as he wonders if she missed him. The princess thinks that she always remembered him, whether it was hard or joyful for her. Dorothea asks why he didn't write to her, and learns that Eden didn't think it was time for him to get closer to her. She assures Eden that she still wants him to be her partner, and asks him the same. Pressing the princess's hand to his cheek, Eden admits to Dorothy that from their first meeting until now, he only wanted to be with her. Previously, Dorothea was greatly fascinated by such words, but now she recalls some episodes from her past life. She remembers how in that life, Eden assured her that she had every right to get what she wanted, and only she could become an empress. Dorothy pushes him away, declaring that she knows what he needs all this for, but she assures him that she is not as useful as he thinks. The princess believes that Eden chose her to get rid of his only complex, despite all his beauty and abilities, the status of the son of his mistress. Dorothea sees no point in having a princess who is treated worse than a bastard, and therefore cannot give him what he wants. Taking the princess's hand, Eden convinces her that there is no one more beautiful than her, and that she is talking nonsense. Dorothea believes that he overestimates her and will definitely be disappointed in the future, so she pushes him away and leaves. However, Eden believes that it is not greed that speaks in the princess, but dreams and hopes, and she stops in surprise. Dorothy still can't understand why he shows so much attention to her. In response, he just smiles and promises that soon she will definitely understand everything herself. The emperor called Dorothy to his place, but for half an hour he had been sitting silently, pretending to be busy. The princess sits, turning over in her head all the possible reasons why Karnan called her to him for the first time since that day. Suddenly, a servant enters the room, and in his hands is some kind of wooden box. He opens the box and takes out a wine with Dorothea Milaneo's name on the label. The emperor reminds Dorothy of how, as a child, she asked him to produce wine in her honor, and now her name is on 100,000 bottles of wine. Dorothea is angry that Karnan did not allocate money for her project, but spent it on 100,000 bottles. But she clenches her fists and thanks him. The emperor declares that Dorothea must dispose of the wine herself, and if she refuses, he will pour it into the rivers. The princess considers this a big waste. She thinks that Karnan is testing her. However, he doesn't understand why he needs to check on her, since he just gave her a gift for her debutante ball. Dorothea sits in her room, replaying the meeting with the emperor in her head, and thinks that he is acting strangely. The princess tries the wine, and the girl likes it so much that she feels sorry to give it to the aristocrats. Since this happens, Dorothea decides to use the wine for a good cause. She throws a box of wine to the knights who are part of the Imperial Guard, who throw caustic jokes at the princess. Suddenly, Stefan appeared next to them from somewhere, who orders them to maintain respect for the Milaneo family. While preparing for the debutante ball, Dorothy tells a surprised Clara that she donated all the bottles of wine to charity. The princess also gave wine to the knightly order and hopes that Stefan will like the gift, and also left it for Clara and her family. Clara thinks that the princess chose too simple a dress for the debutante ball. To divert the topic from her dress, Dorothea asks the maid if there are feelings between her and Stefan. While Clara babbles something embarrassed in her own defense, Dorothea runs out of the room. The princess enters the hall, confident that no one will be interested in her appearance. However, all the curious glances of the assembled aristocrats are directed directly at her. Eden approaches Dorothea and extends his hand to her, and the girl is even a little worried about all this formality. From the side, Theon silently watches the couple having a pleasant conversation. Julia approaches the guy to see if he's okay, and he claims he's just worried. Theon admits that he is honored to be Julia's partner at the debutante ball. Dorothea walks through the festive hall with Theon, and gossip about her simple dress is heard behind her. Julia is sure that people slander out of envy, and if Ray was here late, he would be very angry. The girl thinks that Dorothy and Eden look beautiful, but Theon does not answer Julia, but only silently looks after the princess. The opening of the ball begins, and the emperor, who appears before the public, summons the Spirit of Light in front of everyone. Eden sees the Spirit of Light for the first time, but he is not at all impressed by what he sees. It seems to him that there is nothing special about the spirit, even though legends have been made about it. And although Dorothea understands that it's bad to talk about a gift like that, she's even a little glad that Eden called it something ordinary. The opening is over, and she is trying to escape from the annoying public who are trying to offend her, reminding her of her inability to summon the spirit of light. However, Eden, who arrived immediately, assures everyone that the princess has such an ability because she herself shines like the spirit of light. Out on the balcony, Dorothea thanks Eden for intervening and standing up for her. The princess remarks that he now knows everything about her situation, and he must understand that she cannot give him anything. However, at the very moment when Eden is about to convince her of this, she turns around at Theon's familiar voice. Turning around, Dorothea sees the guy along with Julia, who came to congratulate her on her debut. Having thanked them, the girl catches herself with a strange feeling. She no longer dislikes Julia as before. Eden takes Dorothy by the hand and asks Theon if he will go back to Phrygia, because he also graduated from the academy. However, Theon reveals that he plans to stay in Lampus, as he still has a lot to learn. The performance of the debutantes begins, and Eden, again taking the princess by the hand, leads her into the hall. Returning to the celebration, Dorothea watches Eden dance and notes to herself that he does it very well, so everyone around him steals glances at him. Nereus watches him with anger, because he believes that he should be the center of attention instead of the mudblood Eden. That is why Nereus crushes the carpet under his feet before Princess Dorothea's dance begins, in order to disgrace him and Eden. Approaching the princess, Eden takes her hand to invite her to dance. The crowd disperses to make way for the couple, and they begin their dance. Dorothea feels as if she is flying, because she feels so calm next to Eden, and she understands that she cannot resist his charm. The guy admits that there are still things he can't do, for example, winning the princess's heart. Eden notices the folded carpet and realizes that it was made specifically for someone to trip and fall. Without being confused, he smoothly takes Dorothea away from there so that she doesn't trip, and she also notices a fold in the carpet. The emperor enters the hall and watches his daughter dance with Eden. At the same time, Julia is very concerned that Theon has become ill again. Eden asks Dorothea if she ever thought that she would like to control the spirit of light. Having received the positive answer that he had hoped for, the guy twirls the princess even more in the dance, and suddenly the space around them is illuminated with sparks of light. Suddenly, the lights in the hall go out, and Dorothea is frightened by the memory of how the same thing happened in her past life. However, the sparks around the dancers are so strong that the entire hall is illuminated by the spirit of light, and Dorothea does not understand what happened. Continuing to spin her around in a dance, Eden tries to convince the princess that she is the real heir to the throne. He assures her that she is a suitable candidate to succeed the empress, and those gathered are impressed that the princess was able to summon the spirit of light. Going out onto the balcony, Dorothea asks Eden to admit that the spirit of light is his work. Touching her hair with his lips, he admits that he just wanted to show stupid people that she is worthy of the throne. The girl angrily pushes his hand away from her and asks Eden to stop. Indeed, during the dance, at some point, her heart began to pound strongly. She thought that she really was able to summon a spirit. However, when she realized that this was not her strength, she was very disappointed. And who, if not Eden, should know this feeling? Dorothea demands the guy to confess where he got such power, because she is sure that it was not she who summoned the spirit. After a moment of silence, Eden puts his hand into his pocket and pulls out a summoning crystal. Kneeling in front of the princess, he hands her the crystal with a request to use it. He admits that he could not give her the stone then, before the execution, and therefore does it now. The girl is surprised, because it turns out that Eden also returned to the past, just like her. But he corrects her, because to be more precise, it was he who asked to return time for both of them. Eden decides to tell her the whole truth about what really happened, starting from the time when he was small and weak, even before his return. Jonathan mocked him and treated him with contempt, and Eden could not do anything about it. But soon he was presented with a great opportunity. It was that day when he and his brother went hunting, and Jonathan said that he did not want to be paired with Eden and did not give him a horse. Perhaps if he had then given up the horse to his brother, then everything could have been different. But the horse reared up under him, and the next moment, Jonathan found himself hanging on a cliff, and only furiously ordered Eden to pull him out. Eden understood that he could not have pulled out his brother alone, and they could have fallen together. The rope was not long enough to tie it to the tree, and Jonathan, instead of asking for help, only continued to swear. Looking at his brother, Eden turned around and left, promising to call someone for help. When help arrived, it turned out that Jonathan had already fallen off the cliff and died. And from that moment on, Aiden became the sole heir of the Brontes. From that time on, the guy had the feeling that the whole world belonged to him, because he saw how people who once despised him suddenly began to suck up to him. That's when he started his handkerchief throwing tricks and watched as stupid girls rushed to pick it up. One day, Dorothea found Eden doing this, and she was amused by what he was doing. Then the guy realized for the first time that someone understood his cruel jokes and that he and the girl were alike. Not knowing that the princess was in front of him, he introduced himself to her and asked her to tell him her name. He was very surprised when he learned that the princess herself was standing in front of him, but he was even more surprised when she invited him to work for her in the palace. He agreed, because Eden saw the princess's hidden abilities that others did not see. He believed that her inability to summon spirits lay in her perfection. Eden was sure that fate itself had arranged their meeting, and he was ready to do anything for the sake of the one he loved. He didn't care how to achieve what he wanted. He was ready to sacrifice people if necessary. Eden learned that Theon had tricked himself into becoming the princess's fiancé and was ready to kill him. Somehow he found out that Theon was not doing this out of love, but in order to simply be closer to Raymond, or more precisely to the Spirit of Light. Theon did not understand how Eden knew all this, but he understood everything himself. After all, after so many years, a boy with red eyes was born in the Fried family, and there was a high probability that the spirit of darkness awakened with him. Since it is impossible to stay in the palace, even if you are from Raymond's inner circle, the best way to stay there is to marry the princess. However, Eden already knew that Dorothea would soon kill her brother and seize the throne. Theon realized that the Chancellor was not killing him, because after the death of Raymond, Theon would also die. Eden was sure that Dorothea's husband would not tell her anything, because then he would have to admit that he married her for personal gain. Eden left the room, and Theon thought about how everything could have turned out this way. After all, he actually tried several times to tell Dorothea the truth, but seeing her love, he could not do it. Some time passed from that day, and rumors began to spread that Dorothea's army had defeated the troops of Emperor Ray. This event began to be called the Princess's Rebellion, and they demanded that she prove her right to the throne by calling on the Spirit of Light. However, after Raymond's death, Dorothea's insomnia worsened, and she looked very exhausted. Eden did not know how to help the girl, but continued to assure her that he was exactly suitable for the role of Empress. Therefore, having gathered his knights, Eden sent them in search of the Stone of Light, which was called the source of the power of the spirit. Not long before this, Julia went in search of the stone to help her lover Theon. Knowing this, the knights looked everywhere for the girl to take the stone from her. Hearing at the market that she was wanted, Julia hurriedly went to a place where she agreed to meet a friend who was supposed to take the girl to Theon. However, Eden was already waiting for her there with a sharply sharpened dagger at the ready. He knew about the agreed meeting place because Julia wrote to Theon about it, and the Chancellor intercepted all their letters on Dorothea's initiative. It was when Eden was about to present her with the crystal that he witnessed the scene between the princess and her husband. Seeing Dorothea's love for Theon, Eden decided not to give her the crystal. After all, in this way he would prolong his opponent's life, and this was not in his interests. He only again consoled the upset girl, promising her that someday everything would definitely be in her hands. Eden understood that Dorothea needed love, and he could give it to the princess, but the girl was only interested in Theon. After some time, the garden that Dorothea planted for Theon completely rotted, and nothing ever bloomed there again. Eden was angry that even though his death was approaching, Theon still left a feeling of guilt in the princess's heart. Theon realized that it was Eden who killed Julia, and therefore decided not to reveal his secret to the princess, so that Eden would continue to suffer. It wasn't long before Theon Freed committed suicide in the princess's room, and then Eden realized that this was the most ideal revenge that Theon was capable of. Less than a few months after Theon's death, Dorothea's courtiers decided to found a new state. They were indignant that the Empress lay exhausted in her bed all the time, while the empire was in decline. The courtiers were afraid that the empire could be attacked at any moment, because Ubara was in a very unstable situation. The people were constantly rebelling, and famine and plague were raging in the empire itself, and responsibility for all this was placed on the Empress. The courtiers told Idan of their intention to overthrow the tyrant and install in her place a new ruler, in whom they saw the chancellor. In response to this, the chancellor himself declared that he would not recognize any other ruler other than Dorothea Milaneo. Eden constantly sat at the bedside of the empress, who did not stop suffering over her deceased husband. After a while, Dorothea still got out of bed, but it was impossible to calm the angry people. People demanded her execution. Eden begged the girl to make him her husband, and then he would do everything possible to stop the angry people. In response to this, Dorothea allowed him to do whatever he wanted, but she could not marry him. And when the rebels broke into the castle to seize the empress, Eden could do nothing to help her. With pain in his heart, he rose to the place of execution, to the noisy cheers of the crowd who wanted to make him the new emperor. Sitting down next to her, he did not lose hope that she would still ask people for mercy. But Dorothea refused to live without Theon. She admitted that she was a villain and failed, and wished Eden to achieve heights as the new ruler. Then the chancellor decided to try to help her one last time, and handed the girl a crystal of the spirit of light. But the empress refused the privilege offered to her, and Eden watched with tears in his eyes as her head was cut off. Unable to bear this sight any longer, he ran away from there, and ran without looking forward. It seemed to him that his heart was about to break. After all, after seeing Dorothea's death, Eden felt for himself what the girl experienced when she saw the death of her lover. Now he realized that he should have given her the crystal back then, and just watched her happiness next to her husband. Perhaps, if he had not wanted more then, his beloved would have remained alive. But in the end, he had to regret his choice. At that moment, when Eden was sobbing on the shore of the lake, the crystal suddenly lit up with a bright light, and he realized that a helping hand was being extended to him. Rux, the queen of the spirits of light, appeared before Eden, who learned that all Milaneos were now dead. She invited the guy to enter into a new contract with her, the Blood Pact. Hearing this proposal, Eden became angry, because Rux could have appeared to Dorothea Milaneo, but she did not. The queen explained that Milaneo's blood was no longer pure, because Dorothea was the first who could not summon spirits. Rux continued to insist on concluding a contract with her and promised to reward the spirit summoner with the power of light. However, Eden did not see the point even in the fact that the sun was shining, because his sun in the face of Dorothea had already set, and he only wanted to be able to see her again. Therefore, he promised Rux that he would enter into a contract with her if the queen would revive Dorothea. But Rux could not do this, because by bringing the girl back to life, she would interfere with the power of Kies, the king of the spirit of darkness. In addition, resurrecting the dead could have a bad effect on time, both universal and Eden's time personally. However, all this did not matter to the guy. He was ready to endure all his childhood torments again, just to revive Dorothy. Then the queen nevertheless agreed to conclude a new contract with Eden on the condition that he would return to his dark past. And so, opening his eyes, he realized that he had truly returned to the past, to the place where he grew up, and this meant only one thing, that the princess was alive again. Then Eden decided that it was better for him not to meet the princess in this life, and was even glad that he could not enter the academy because of that incident on the road. Just when he finally decided that he would not want more in this life, just to make the princess happy, he accidentally met her on the beach. Everything turned out differently, and their destinies were still intertwined, even in this life. Having finished his story, Eden admits that he hoped that Dorothea would not remember anything about her past life. The girl realized that it was thanks to him that she had a chance to start life over again, but she believed that all the words were only for the sake of the desire to have power. Her eyes filled with tears, because now she saw the guy from a completely different side. Wiping Dorothea's tears and kneeling in front of her, Eden gives her the Spirit Stone, because she has always been, and will be, the only empress for him. He wants her to rise to the highest place and shine brightly, not out of greed, but only out of love. Eden clings to the girl and confesses his feelings to the girl, and everything around them is illuminated by the bright glow of the Spirit of Light. Dorothea is grateful to the guy for everything he did for her, but she does not want to accept the crystal from him because she considers herself unworthy after everything she has done in the past. At that moment, when they argue about whether the princess deserves to become empress, her father calls her to him. The emperor is angry that the girl hid the fact that she can summon the Spirit of Light. The princess insists that she does not know how to do this, and she herself does not know how it all happened during the dance. Karnan orders her to demonstrate her abilities anyway, and Dorothy notices that his gaze has changed. Previously, he always looked at the girl with contempt, but due to the fact that Karnan now thinks that his daughter has power, she felt interested in him. Dorothy admits that she cannot summon the spirit of light, but the Emperor, changing his face, orders her to prove her worth. The girl does not understand why it is so important for him whether she has the strength of spirit, because there is Prince Raymond, and her strength can only become a hindrance for him. However, Karnan needs this at least in order to no longer hear words that Milaneo will come to an end. Since Dorothea is the same child whom Ellis gave birth to at the cost of her life, she does not dare end the entire family, and must prove that the Empress's sacrifice was not in vain. Turning to the window, Karnan orders his daughter to learn from Raymond how to handle spirits, but not to take up much of his time. The Emperor is confident that if Dorothea begins to possess this gift, the talk that the imperial family is fading away will subside. Sitting in the garden after a conversation with her father, Dorothy twists in her head his words that now she will have to perform duties as befits a member of the Milaneo family. Looking at the crystal in her hands, she remembers that Eden is a contractor, so the girl will be able to summon the spirit using the stone as long as he is nearby. He promised that he would always be there so that she could call on the light at any time. The girl is caught in these thoughts by Raymond, who joyfully runs to his sister to congratulate her on her abilities. Lenascore Palace was one of many that Ellis used. It was empty after her death, but now Dorothea will live there by Karnan's decree. Ray is amazed by his sister's incredible strength and is in awe of the way people looked at her when she summoned the spirit's strength. Dorothy admits to her brother that she did not want to use this power, but her brother himself knows about this because he noticed her surprise. Raymond asks his sister not to be so serious, because she just gained the power to control spirits. And that's all. There's no need to bother your head with unnecessary things. Aiden approaches them, and the princess excuses herself to her brother to talk to the guy alone. Stepping aside, she hands Eden the crystal and asks him to take it back. She admits that she doesn't want to become empress, and he is very surprised. After all, Eden thought that all Dorothea wanted was to become an empress and live happily with the people she loved. But the girl does not want the past to repeat itself and is not going to allow the slightest chance for this to happen. Eden continues to insist that with this crystal, Dorothea will be able to repay all the disdain she has suffered, and everyone will see her as an heir worthy of the throne. The princess apologizes to the guy. She believes that she lacks a lot, because even he, not being Milaneo, can control spirits. Eden hoped that she would be happy to receive this power, because in reality, he did not want to make any more mistakes. The guy wanted to give her the crystal many times, but if she needed it and Eden wasn't around, the girl could have problems. That is why he waited for the opportunity to make his debut in society so that he could constantly be in Lampas, but it turned out that it was all in vain. Taking the princess by the hand, Eden offers to lead her back to the hall, where everyone is already waiting for them for the feast, and Poe should serve the cake. Raymond is very concerned about Theon's condition, but his friend assures him that he is fine now. He realized that the power outage during Dorothy's debut was because of him. Theon apologizes to the prince for not being able to hold out until his arrival, but his condition was so bad that for a moment he was unable to control the spirit of darkness. Raymond also apologizes for not coming earlier to be with his friend, but thanks to the princess's spirit, everything is resolved. Raymond happily tells his friends that Dorothea will soon move to another palace. Julia is concerned that the princess has such powerful power because now she can lay claim to the throne. Raymond knows that Dorothy has always reacted strongly to talk of the throne, but he believes there is nothing to worry about. The prince always considered his sister very smart, so he would not be surprised if she became empress. Julia doesn't understand how he can talk about this so calmly, because Raymond could lose his throne. The prince answers this with a smile that, even if he does not know what Dorothy wants, he knows himself very well. Entering the hall arm in arm with Eden, the princess notices that the audience has changed a lot. The looks of people directed at her did not express curiosity and interest, but intense tension. Dorothea realizes that they are thinking that she could become the next empress. Nereus approaches them, applauding how the princess could summon spirits all along, but hid it. The girl insists that it was an accident, but Nereus does not believe that the blackout and her shining were a coincidence. The people gathered around ask Dorothea to repeat her dance and compliment her. The girl feels firsthand how an enemy who was just pointing a knife at you can suddenly turn out to be on your side. And a friend who seemed to always be there suddenly betrays you. Nereus raises a toast to the princess, and those gathered around congratulate her. Raising her glass, Dorothea thanks everyone for their congratulations and asks them to drink and have fun just as they despised her all this time. After emptying her glass, she smiles and states that it was a joke, so she asks everyone to relax and have fun, not forgetting that the princess wanted to try the cake and immediately leave the hall after that. Eden brought her a piece. The girl is touched by how attentive he is to everything she says and to all her desires. Stefan accidentally overhears the other knights talking about how lucky he is to serve the princess, because with her increase in status, he will also be promoted. The knight sees no point in even answering them. He is very glad that Dorothea was finally recognized by everyone around him. Sitting in the carriage with Eden, the princess remembers how in a past life he performed his tricks with scarves. Today, she remembered this moment when she said a toast, because then she realized that she had not changed after all. The girl wants to know why Eden hid Theon's secret, because now everything could be different. She doesn't understand why he decided to confess now, when he might never reveal the whole truth. Taking the girl by the hand, Eden admits that he could not watch how the weight of sin for the death of the prince and Theon weighed on her. Even though the princess thinks she hasn't changed, Eden doesn't think so. He invites her, with the help of his power, to be close to Theon and live happily with him, because this is precisely why Eden returned. Even if he is destined to love her until the end of his days, then for her sake, he will always be nearby so that she can take advantage of his power. Having reached the castle, Eden asks to be allowed to accompany her for the last time and offers his hand to the princess. At the doorstep of the house, the girl is met by her favorite people, Stefan, Clara, Joe, and Poe. Taking Eden's hand, Dorothea hopes that this day will not leave him with bad memories. Approaching her loved ones, the princess wishes the guy a good trip and asks him to be careful. The girl enters the castle, where everyone joyfully greets her and congratulates her on her debut with applause. Poe presents her with a cake that was prepared especially in honor of the princess. Everyone congratulates her the same way the people in the palace did, but now her soul is calm, and she does not want to lose these valuable emotions. She understands that she will be much happier if she remains with the people dear to her and does not become an empress, and that is enough for her. After the holiday, Dorothea lies down on the bed and finds a crystal of the Spirit of Light in her pocket. She goes out onto the balcony and finds herself thinking only about Eden, although this stone could help her be with Theon. Taking a bath after a difficult day, Eden thinks about how everything turned out. When he first returned, he thought that the princess did not remember anything about the past, and believed that he would someday have a chance. When he saw Fried's scarf in her bedroom, he realized that he wouldn't have a chance in this life either. Eden always tried to be close to Dorothea, but the girl's gaze was always turned to Theon. In fact, he did not want to give the stone. He thought that, having received it, Dorothy would leave him forever. In the end, he gave her the crystal and did everything in his power. But now it's all over. Eden's father and stepmother knock on Eden's door, and he gets dressed and opens the door for them. They ask how the princess's debut ball went, and it's clear that the Brontes are glad that their son was Dorothea's partner. Eden tells his parents that he is tired and apologizes, but when he turns around to go to bed, he suddenly hears his brother's voice behind him. Jonathan stands in his bedroom and looks at Eden with an angry look, who asks him to leave. Jonathan is sure that his brother is acting so impudently because he is hiding behind the princess's skirt. Eden continues to insist that he is tired and asks to be left alone, but Jonathan pushes him. He shouts that Eden's life will not change if he went to the ball with the princess once, because he is just an illegitimate son. Leaning over him, Eden says that, unlike him, Jonathan has nothing but his bloodline, so he must protect this and be able to read people well. The guy orders his brother to watch his words from now on and kicks him out of his room. Sitting down on his bed, tired, Eden thinks about what he should do now, because he has achieved his goal and has nothing left to strive for. Suddenly, seeing the radiance of the Spirit of Light around him, he clearly senses that the princess is calling upon the spirits. He thinks she is showing off her abilities in the palace, but in reality, she is just standing on the balcony, thinking about him. Pressing his hands to his chest, Eden hopes that the girl feels him as much as he feels her. Sometime later, the Duke of Bronte and his wife arrived at the Emperor's palace to present his son to him. Jonathan greets the Emperor and says that he recently graduated from the academy. Eden also entered the living room, introducing himself to the Emperor as the youngest son of the Bronte family. Karnan notices that the guy not only has an outstanding appearance, but the level of education is felt in all his movements, and he is completely different from his older brother. The Emperor remembers that Eden was Dorothea's partner at the ball and asks how long they have known each other. Learning that the princess and Eden met in Cerithian, Karnan asks if she invoked the power of the spirit there. To protect the princess from trouble, Eden replies that he first saw Dorothy summon spirits at the ball. Karnan watches the guy, who doesn't show any excitement or fear. Thinking that he needs to be careful, the Duke, not missing a chance, decides to talk about how the princess was friends with Eden in Cerithian and spent a lot of time with him. Jonathan is angry that everyone is talking only about his brother again, because they came here to introduce him to the Emperor. Noticing her son's dissatisfaction, the Duchess begins to praise Karnona Jonathan. Having bowed, the guy informs the Emperor of his desire to serve him and gain experience as the future head of the Bronte family. However, Karnan turns around, declaring that Lampas is not the place to raise future heads of families. The parents are impressed by the way Eden behaved in front of the Emperor, and he thanks them for his good upbringing. Looking at his brother, Eden feels sorry for him, because he could boast of the end of epistemia, but only put himself in an awkward position. He pats Jonathan on the shoulder to thank him for bringing him to Lampas, but the guy pushes Eden's hand away. Their parents ask them not to quarrel, and Eden understands that they expect him to marry Dorothea and help Jonathan take his place in society. However, Eden considers these expectations too high, because all this is not part of his plans. At that moment, when Eden is thinking about how he would like Dorothea again, suddenly she appears in the room. He is very surprised, since the princess expressed a desire to talk with the guy alone. Having seen off the Duke and his wife and wished them a good journey, the girl asks Eden to follow her into a separate room. Passing by the courtiers, Eden hears admiration addressed to him and catches himself in the fact that he used to like such interest, but now it only embarrasses him. While they were walking, the princess never turned in his direction, and therefore the guy thinks that she is thereby rejecting him. Sitting down on the sofa, Dorothea invites Eden to sit opposite her, and he becomes nervous, not understanding what she wants to talk about. The girl admits that all this time, it seemed to her that this second life was given to her as punishment, since she was a tyrant. Therefore, she was always tormented that only she remembers everything that happened in the past, and she did not have a chance to atone for her guilt. As soon as she felt happy, she convinced herself that she could not be happy, because she had made so many unhappy. Hearing this, Eden realizes that all the love and sacrifices that he dedicated to her were only suffering for her, and in fact, he did not even suspect what she really wants and what she is striving for. However, Dorothea suddenly admits that she has now changed her mind, and this life was a new chance that Eden gave her. The guy listens in surprise that the princess, without naming names, told her story to her brother. As it turned out, after thinking a little, Raymond suggested that the person who gave another a chance at a new life should also be given a second chance. Rising from the sofa, the girl admits that now she understands that thanks to Eden, she found out what her brother was thinking about and saved Theon. Also thanks to him, she met Stefan, Clara, Joe, and Poe, and she had a chance to protect these people dear to her. The princess hugs Eden to her, asks for forgiveness, and thanks him for giving her all this. The guy's eyes fill with tears. Burying his nose into the princess's shoulder, Eden hugs her tightly and holds her close. Suddenly, he is embarrassed because he burst into tears in front of Dorothea. And for the first time, the girl sees him so sincere and even sweet. He admits that her look confuses him, but Dorothy looks at him and thinks about how she saw him differently before. Then he was a man without flaws, handsome but dangerous, which is why he was so attractive. With all this, he regrets his life, makes sacrifices for her sake, and cries because of her. And the girl doesn't understand how one person can be so different. Leaning next to him on the sofa and approaching his face, Dorothy asks if he likes her. He confesses, and the girl's cheeks flush red, because she still can't believe that someone can like her. Eden takes Dorothea's hand, places it on his chest, in which his heart is beating wildly, and admits that no matter how much he promised himself not to love her, when she loved another, he could not do it. He strokes the face of the girl, who still cannot believe that she can be loved so much. Eden heard that Dorothy refused to become empress and is interested in her plans for life. She admits that she just plans to live in peace, because in her past life, everyone had a hard time because of her, and now she needs to live correctly. Eden is happy for her decision, because this is what Dorothea really wants, and therefore she needs to do it this way. Suddenly remembering something, Eden puts his hand into his pocket and takes out a medallion, handing it to the princess. The guy noticed that the crystal was inconvenient to carry with you just like that, and ordered this medallion into which the stone can be inserted. Eden puts the medallion around her neck, and Dorothea feels like her heart is about to jump out of her chest. The guy reminds how as a child she refused to accept an expensive gift from him, because then they were not close enough. Eden wishes the princess a good day and leaves, and Stefan and Clara enter the room, who cannot hide her delight at the gift. Dorothea is surprised by the maid's confession that she has long noticed that Eden likes the princess. Clara says that it always seemed to her that since childhood, the boy had the eyes of an adult man who had already experienced the pain of love. The maid strongly recommends that her mistress act only according to the dictates of her heart and not listen to anyone else. Raymond comes to his father, who has been waiting for him in his office for a long time. Karnan is very angry with his son because he was late, and the emperor asked him to bring a plan to increase wheat production in the Barahan region. Standing before the emperor, Raymond says he is thinking of changing the wheat variety to increase production by 5 tons. But Karnan is unhappy with his idea, because given the population of Barakan, there is not much land for wheat production. He doesn't like any of Raymond's ideas and wants his son to do whatever it takes if he's going to run the empire from now on. After the meeting with Karnan, the prince has another meeting, and he is upset, because it seemed to him that after graduating from the academy, he would be able to breathe freely. However, he has already officially entered into state affairs, so that now nobles from all provinces are lining up to meet him. It's hard for Raymond to realize that he can't even manage agriculture, something he thought he was good at. He thinks with regret that a week has passed since he was last in his garden. Having met her brother, the princess notices that he looks very tired. Raymond is very touched that Dorothy noticed this, but she insists that she is only worried that his fatigue might affect government affairs. Eden doesn't understand why Dorothea hasn't used the soul stone yet. Every day he sat and waited, but after that day the princess never used the stone. The guy doesn't understand what his relationship with the princess is now, and whether he should go to her himself or wait until she arrives. Aiden also doesn't know whether he should smile friendly and talk to her, or whether Dorothy wants him to keep his distance. The main thing he didn't understand was whether his love still had any chance. However, in any case, he wants to walk along the same road with her, and that means he should continue to live honestly. Standing at the window, Eden notices that people have gathered below who want to meet him, and he goes down to them. As it turned out, there were servants of different girls below who sent Eden gifts from themselves. The guy thanks them for the gifts, since it is impolite to refuse, but asks them not to do this in the future. Suddenly, a red-haired girl gets out of the carriage and heads straight to Eden. The guy recognizes her as Monica Afanita, and she hands him a letter asking him to read it. Monica was engaged to Nereus Hark, and at this moment should have already been discussing the main details of the wedding. There was no reason in Monica's family to reject the marriage with Prince Harka, and therefore everything was predetermined. Before Eden returned, he was very amused when she showed her attention to him. Thanks to communication with her, he could receive information about Karka, and he liked that she herself made fun of Nereus. In order to gain Eden's trust, she was ready to reveal her secrets and admitted that she did not want to marry Hark. Realizing that the girl was about to confess her love to him, Eden asked not to say anything for which she could not answer. The guy was sure that Monica wanted to upset the engagement, and therefore used him. However, the only betrothal partners comparable in level to Prince Hark could only be considered Raymond and Theon. Eden announced that he did not want to be at the center of a scandal in this way, and the girl turned away and left. However, after some time, Monica and Nereus broke off their engagement, and the groom blamed Eden for their breakup. When Nereus ascended the throne, he attacked the Ubera Empire, and perhaps the breaking of the engagement was just a pretext for the attack. And now this woman stands in front of him and hands him a letter, which Eden promises to read. In the letter, Monica invites Eden to lunch at Caro's restaurant next week because she needs to talk to him about something. The guy did not like the persistent tone of the letter, and he was once again convinced that the girl, as before, had neither tact nor manners. Eden tears up the letter, because it was because of this that Monica and Nereus broke up in a past life, and the war began. Dorothea doesn't understand why Raymond always comes to her room to rest. Looking affectionately at his sister and smiling at her, the prince admits that he rests when he looks at her face. The prince remembers how Dorothy used to be angry with him when he did not behave as befits the heir to the throne, and this offended him. It's just that then Dorothea believed that to become an emperor, he had to be ideal. But now she understands that strong authority does not always help. Now she wants Ray to let go of his authority with her and just relax, because the prince sometimes needs to take a breath. Raymond complains to his sister that he still has a lot of things to do, and the emperor wants him to help him increase wheat production. However, no matter how much the prince thinks, nothing comes to his mind, because the land there is bad, and even 3-field land will not help. After thinking a little, Dorothea tells her brother that she once heard how, in one country, they coped with such a task. There, they alternated the cultivation of crops that required different levels of soil fertility, and thereby increased the yield. The girl advises the prince to follow this example, and he is very happy, not understanding why he didn't think of it himself. Raymond thanks his sister for her advice and for helping him maintain his strength. The prince is once again convinced that Dorothy would be better suited for the role of the empress than him, but she does not like it when he talks about it. The girl confesses to her brother that she is thinking about taking up fencing again and asks him to help her with this. Stefan comes to the captain of the Shining Knights, Arthur, who summoned him to his place. The captain praises Stefan for doing a good job protecting the princess all this time and considers appointing him as his second in command. However, this means that the knight must leave Dorothea's personal guard and henceforth work in the name of honor. While studying in the garden, Stefan ponders the captain's offer because they want to promote him even without an exam. But the guy doesn't understand what's the point of being a knight if he can't achieve promotion on his own. Suddenly, Dorothy attacks Stefan from behind, but the guy quickly finds his bearings and knocks the sword out of her hands. Despite the slight pain caused, she admits that he is the most amazing knight, and she didn't have a chance to stab him. Noticing that Stefan has been training since the morning, Dorothea realizes that something is bothering him and asks him about it. She heard that they want to appoint him as deputy head of the order and does not understand why he is sad, because this is good news. The princess assures Stefan that he is worthy to take this place even without her, and she advises him to take this chance. The girl asks him to trust her words and move forward, because she values him very much and wants him to do well. Stefan thinks that 10 years ago the princess was very young and did not even reach his waist. Now she stands firmly on her feet and speaks to him, and there is no longer that weak princess who is about to fall. He used to look at her like a child taking her first steps, but she has become an adult, and he is only now realizing it. Dorothea is already moving forward, but he is still marking time in the same place. Realizing all this, Stefan kneels in front of her as a sign of gratitude. After some time, the initiation ceremony took place, to which, of course, the princess also appeared. The girl still finds it unpleasant to be among aristocrats, but she tries to smile and answer everyone politely. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls Dorothea, and turning around, she sees Theon in front of her, who was looking for her at the request of the prince. Extending his hand to the princess, the guy offers to accompany her to her brother. Taking Theon's arm, Dorothea goes to Raymond, thinking that now that she knows everything about the guy, he seems different to her. Previously, when she was focused only on her emotions, she did not notice his powers. The princess does not understand how she could love Theon without really knowing anything about him. After walking some more, Dorothy realizes that Raymond wasn't really looking for her and asks why Theon deceived her. Embarrassed, the guy apologizes for using the prince as an excuse because it seemed to him that she was uncomfortable among those people. Dorothea catches herself thinking that now for some reason she is no longer happy that Theon shows concern for her. Suddenly, the guy asks her to have dinner with her this week because he has something important to tell her. Bending over the girl, he admits that for this conversation, he needs to be alone with her. He explains that on the day of her debut, he had urgent matters to attend to, and therefore was unable to congratulate her properly. Dorothy understands that Theon felt bad that day because of the spirit of darkness, and that is why the lights in the hall went out. After Eden gave the princess the summoning stone, the girl began to study materials related to the theme of spirits. She learned that any force tends to surge if there is too much of it, and the forces of light and darkness cancel each other out. Then Dorothea realized that Theon married her for this reason, not being able to cope with the power of darkness alone. Sometimes he did this through Raymond, so Dorothy hated her brother. It seemed to her that he was taking her husband away from her. Deciding that Theon plans to tell her about the power of darkness at the meeting, the princess agrees to meet him at the restaurant. Clara runs in and informs Dorothea about the beginning of the ceremony and carries with her the package that the princess asked her to find. Running up to Stefan, the girl is glad that she was not late and hands the knight a package. Unwrapping it, Stefan is surprised to discover the Sturcalypse sword. In her previous life, Dorothea liked to collect famous swords, and this was one of them. Stefan gratefully accepts the gift, because this is the first sword that the princess gave to her knight. Suddenly, Stefan takes out of his pocket the brooch that Dorothy once gave him and hands it to the princess. The girl thinks that he is returning the brooch to her, but the next moment he points to his chest and thereby asks